I will now call to order the City of Sherwood Budget Committee meeting for Saturday, May 17th, 2014. Julie, will you please do roll call?
Chair Kirkin,
Here.
Vice Chair Waller, here. Andy McConnell,
Here.
Steve Munsterman,
Here.
Kim Rocha-Pearson,
Here.
Neil Shannon,
Here.
and Brian Stetcher is absent. Mayor Middleton,
Here.
Council President Henderson,
Here.
Councilor Butterfield,
Here.
Councilor Clark,
Here.
Councilor Grant is here, Councilor Folsom is absent, and no Councilor Langer.
We expect him though. He's involved with the Friar Trot. So.
Okay.
All right. Some old business from last meeting that wasn't resolved, so I was going to bring it up and see if we had any opinions and maybe come to some agreement. The first was there was a recommendation to add the candy from the candy for the parade floats back into the budget. Is this something the committee would like to do?
I didn't ask that, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't care about that.
Okay. All right. We're going with that. There was a recommendation to cut 1% from the general fund department, excluding personal services. Julie made a list of potential cuts the directors prepared. Is that list something the committee would like to do?
I had one question that seemed less than discretionary, and that was the maintenance for the software. Is that really a discretionary item, the 2420?
I believe the bill will come in less than what I budgeted, but I don't know at this point.
So, because obviously you have to pay for software maintenance, so that might not be a realistic cut.
Correct. There is nothing in our court budget. It's basically our Redflex payments and our software costs. So, and I can't cut for Redflex payments.
Exactly. Okay.
Anybody else have any comments on that? In favor or against or indifferent? I'm in favor of it.
Well, I guess one comment I had is that I know that in at least the last 3 years, perhaps as many as 5 years, the budget has always come in under budget, typically anywhere from 3 to 4% from, I think, all departments. I certainly think it's always a good goal. I'm not a big fan of spending money you don't have to spend. And I think it's a goal that might be communicated to the managers as far as, this is something we'd like to see. But, whether or not to take a line item by line item, we're going to cut 1% out of this line item or 1% out of this software cost, I'm not sure that it contributes anything.
Contributes back 1%. But I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to bring one thing up on this is this was brought back by every department head, so obviously they knew they could live without it. If not, they wouldn't have put it on there. And this kind of showed our budget's going up how much percent this year?
17%.
17%. That's a pretty good chunk going up. There's got to be areas maybe we could trim back a little. And, like you say, we come in under budget. No, we don't always, because we have to go into other funds and we're dipping around and all that. So, but I think if it's citizens' money, all they're doing is taking away some meals. And there is a few areas that may just be a small amount, but obviously if it's something that turns critical, the department can always move their own money around because they're given more or less a pot of money and they're the ones that determine where it all goes. It's not when they can do something in here, say he actually used one of these items, I don't think that they would be denied if they're still within budget. This is just items they're taking out, but if it wouldn't deny them from actually being able to do that. They would just have to, we've done that before. Something comes up, you spend the money on it, and it wasn't actually in the budget. I'd like to see a line item budget so we know line by line where we are spending our money. How do we really, we don't know. And that's my goal, is to get the line item budget so we would be able to ourselves go, and that's why we're a committee here, to determine where our money goes. We don't really know at this point. So that's my main concern, I guess.
And I agree with you, although that would almost in some ways bring up a more serious consideration, which is, are we being sandbagged? Are budgets inflated a little bit so that they can be heroes at the end of the year and says, hey, I deserve my raise because I was under budget? So, I mean, that I would consider to be more serious concern, is that, hey, we're being inflated and then, told we're heroes at the end of the year. So,
Can I respond to that, please? So I do want to say that putting this list together was extremely difficult for our departments because we did go through and allocate how much we were going to spend for every contract, for every piece of software we need to pay maintenance on. And so this was very difficult to put together, even though the dollar amounts were very small. Some of us struggled greatly. Like I said, I had nowhere to take this from but software for my department and legal fees for the finance side because there isn't anything else in our budgets. So I can say honestly that nobody's padding their budgets. There's not fluff in there, and that this was a difficult process for people. And I can't guarantee that if we cut this out, that we won't come back for a supplemental later and say we need additional money for legal fees or different things later. We just don't know what we need, especially in an area like legal fees. It happens when it happens, and we can't predict exactly how much we'll need. Like this year, we ended up $100,000 over. So I just want to put that out there. We can live with this. If you want to make the cut, that's fine. We'll do that. But I just want you to know this was a difficult process. Councilor Clark?
So I just have a question on what Mayor Middleton said. We do receive summaries, and this is just a broad question. Why is it that we don't receive kind of a budget that includes the line items?
At this point, our software can't put that report together for us. When we're in the new system, it has a much better budget module to it so that we can have more of that detail and get reports out. Right now, everything's in Excel, and it's not pretty. It's just lists. So that's where we're at this point.
I have a couple of comments. So I like the process of going through and trimming the fat, right? I do budgets all the time, so I mean I get that there's fluff, but I also understand that there are some departments and some areas that have already trimmed, and causing them to trim more is not necessarily the best thing to do. So I have a couple of concerns about exactly what you said about legal, because professional services, it does not take very much to quickly exceed your budget through no fault of your own. I have a little bit of a concern about trimming out training. Training is how we continuously improve ourselves. And the maintenance, like Lynette said, and then uniforms for the police. Now, my question would be, are these uniforms that we need? I assume so, because they were in the budget. And if we don't have the uniforms, are our officers at risk, or are they using uniforms that should have been replaced? I mean, to me, that's a safety thing, and I'm not okay cutting it out just to make the 1% if it's going to create a safety issue. And then any repairs, maintenance and repairs are always a thing that are kind of like legal. You can't, if that's what you feel that you need, you can't just trim off of that, because those are going to come up, and then, like you said, you're going to come back and ask for a supplemental. So those are my comments.
Have the chief answer the question on the uniforms.
Do you want to answer? Do you want me to do? So, okay.
I mean, when you have specific questions, these are from the department directors.
Yes.
So Chief Growth is the one that made
Yeah.
these cuts. So I think he's the one that should answer what's the impact of those cuts.
Agreed.
Oh, we got a different mic this morning, huh? Is this on? Okay,
It is.
good. So specifically to address your point, some of the things in the uniform line are not safety related. A pair of pants, a shirt, that's not going to affect safety. Obviously, you don't know when somebody's uniform pants are going to blow out on them, or they're going to get in some situation where they get damaged. It certainly doesn't happen very often, but that uniform line does also include bulletproof vests, gun belts, vest carriers, those kinds of things. So there could be some things that are described as safety-related issues, but there could also be many things that wouldn't be described that way.
Okay, so then my follow-up question to that would be, with this cut, do you feel that there's enough money in that pot to cover those safety-related items? Or does this 2242, excuse me, is 10% of that, 50% of that safety-related items?
Don't know.
Okay.
Won't know until we get there.
Okay.
The dollar amount that I put in there was what I felt was what we were going to need to get through the next fiscal year based on what we've used previous years.
Okay.
Some things that I anticipate, but there's lots of things in any line, as the point has been made, that you don't anticipate until
Right.
they happen.
Okay. Thank you.
I see this as an exercise, but I'm not sure what the outcome would be. Grand result we have from doing this. Yes, we could reduce some potential of spending, obviously. But I just worry about the comments that I hear in the room that I believe the majority of the council hired the current city manager, and the current city manager has maintained the current staff that we have. And so I'm wondering why you would, people would question fluff and over budgeting or whatever else to make yourself look good. I think people got better things to do with their time running the city. So I just question that when obviously I didn't hire anybody here, but I trust them until I see some reason other than that. And if there is some reason other than that, I don't know why that's not on the table somewhere. So I see this is just a fun thing to do, but I don't see any reason to reduce things.
I don't think it's fun when we're spending taxpayers' money. And if we can't see a line item, if we can't see where the uniforms, list the uniforms, what you're going to buy, we don't know how much his uniform budget is, do we? He was the one, or every department was given the choice of what cut back. We went up 17% this year. 17% is a lot for these taxpayers to pay. And I can't support this budget at that increase without at least looking at some items to cut back. But that's just my personal opinion. You know, I have a little of experience in government, so I do know how money's spent. And I don't think it's an exercise in futility. I think if we're saving the taxpayers' money, we're doing the taxpayers' job. Thank you.
On that note, is there a motion just to kind of move things along?
Well, I'll make a motion to cut to 1%, but
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on this? All right, let's, in that case, let's vote on the motion to cut the 1% from the general fund by the director's recommendations. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Nay. I believe the nays carry. Moving on to the next item that was
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How much time, I don't think this mic is on. Oh, yes it is. How much time did the staff spend on that 1% cut?
Depends on the department, but
Just give me an estimate. Can you just give me an estimate, please?
probably all total, all of us spent an hour total together.
So,
Each.
No.
so an entire day?
No, all of us
No,
together
but
equal.
8-10 hours total?
No, 1 hour.
Each of you spent an hour working on this instead of something else that may have been more pressing.
Half an hour.
Okay, thank you.
This is the next item that was we need to follow up on is Joe Gall sent a email yesterday, let us know the proposed budget included reduced contributions to the Robin Hood Festival. Does anybody want to discuss that?
Okay, yeah. Well, I kind of talked to Joe about this prior, and I think that at the time I spoke to Joe about it, at least it was worth discussion on whether something like this could be fit back in. This group used to receive a much larger grant from the city, and that's dropped off quite a bit. And I think that the concern a lot of people have, maybe not this year or the next year, but someday this may have to become a city event if we're going to continue it. And it's going to cost us a lot more if it's a city event in staff time. So I just wanted to hear from Joe about whether the feasibility of having that back in. I think when we talked about it, Joe, it was early for you to give me a lot of an idea of if there were ideas on having it back in, and I don't want to hold you to what we said prior to this budget time this budget was released. But what are your thoughts on that? I'd hate to see this festival strangled to death over a period of years before it's brought back to something that the city does.
Well, a little history. This is my second year. When I got here, I was told that we had budgeted $10,000 a year for Robin Hood, but that the long-term goal was to reduce that. And that was the message sent to Robin Hood, that they needed to do a better job of raising their own money. So last year's budget, I stuck with the $10,000. As we're trying to squeeze, as the mayor said, and looking for ways to reduce spending, this is the only group that gets direct funding. There are other groups in town, as this committee knows from history, that would love to have some city resources. So, and the reason I wanted to make it clear is I'm taking that first step toward reducing it by going from 10,000 to 5,000, because that's what I was told was the intent years ago, that when you cut all the funding, Robin Hood would be a different animal because of the significance of the event. It's the oldest community festival. It's actually two festivals. It's not just the summer festival. It's the winter festival here with the tree lighting. This is a direct financial contribution. The city provides a lot of indirect support as well. We provide a lot of indirect support to a lot of other events. But this is an outlier in a sense. So really I'm putting the question on the table by proposing to cut it in half this year. I would like some feedback from this committee, whether you support that or you don't support it. It's not a large amount of money, but it's a philosophical question in terms of should the city be using limited resources to fund a festival like this, which is part of the DNA of the community. It's important. I'm a big supporter. I've learned very quickly how important that is. Long term, I'm concerned about there's a lot of folks that are in leadership positions to make that festival happen that in 5-7 years, just because of burnout, I don't think they're going to be there. And they're trying to recruit new people. But I've seen this in Tualatin with the Crawfish Festival and other things. It's just, if you don't have new energy and new leadership and new people stepping up to volunteer to continue those festivals, I could see that festival saying, we don't have the resources in terms of people to run it, and I don't think this community would like to see that festival just die. So then who takes it on? One possibility would be the city. I'm not proposing that, but that's certainly something I think about down the line. Could be a chamber event, it could be some other event. But I don't think this community wants to see that festival die. We're not there yet. But I think that's on the horizon in terms of who's going to take the leadership reins to keep the festival moving forward. And I may be wrong. People may step up. I mean, it's going on 60 years. But I know the person that runs that has been doing it for many, many years. And there's going to come a point when he's going to want to spend his time somewhere else and focus somewhere else. So that's related to this. But I think the immediate question is, do you think, and I'm put it out there, and that's why I sent the email yesterday. You couldn't find it anywhere in the budget. Do you support starting to cut the financial contribution in half to the organization or not? So it's not a major, it's $5,000 we're talking here. It's really more from a philosophical standpoint, what does this budget committee believe in terms of, should we continue funding that, or should we be reducing it? So that's the question on that I think we need to focus on.
Councilor Clark?
So I have a question and then a comment. My question is, you talked about the Crawford, or the Crawfish Festival, Tualatin. Is that run by the city? Or is it run by the association?
I don't know who took it over. I know that it fell apart and it, they're contracting
The
it
city
out.
is contracting it out? Okay, so the city runs it through a contract. Okay. I just was wondering, since you mentioned them, I have to agree with Councilor Grant that this is a community event. It is not a special interest group. It supports all of the community of Sherwood. And so I feel that as the city, we should be supportive of it. It's a historical tradition, and I think that cutting the funding would send the wrong message to the community as a whole. It's not one group. They support everyone. Their grandstand has every group come out and do performances and booths from all around. And I think it is something that we should continue to support as the historical base of the community of Sherwood.
So just for clarity, at the 10,000 level, not the 5,000.
Correct.
Thank you.
I want to. I appreciate Councilor Clark for pointing that out, particularly the stage part, because if people are curious about where this would come from, just having been involved in that group, those types of things, the entertainment, the quality of the entertainment, the quality of the street performances, and those are their big expenses. Yes, they do have the beer garden and whatnot, and they have some income from that, and they have an elaborate income scheme, although I think that there are areas that they could make more money. As a businessman, I look at it, but it's true. That's where it's going to come from. The quality of the event would drop. They just would not be able to afford those the performance stuff that goes on that makes it a specific festival, not just a street festival.
I have a question. So I think when I first started on council, we were giving them about 20,000.
17.
And then
20,
it's just, gradually decreased over the years. And maybe this is a question for Craig. There you are. I knew I'd seen you somewhere. So just like cruising and every event in town, this is the largest event. Well, it's not the largest attended event, but it's the largest 3-day event. At the end of every year, do the Robin Hood Committee and the city sit down and talk about what went well, what didn't go well, how they can potentially save money by, the advice that you have about basically maintaining and securing the city, as well as from a public safety. I know they have somebody from the police department who serves on their board, but every year that we've cut it, they've still been able to have it. But I'm kind of wondering, what is that last, pot of money that they can't seem to secure every year that goes toward things like security, porta potties. I'm just kind of wondering, what is the threshold for them? And so if they met every year with Public Works and or the city and police and said, this is what's going well, because I know security is a huge cost for them because it's 24 hours a day for 3 whole days, right, Councilor Grant? Yeah, and that's probably $5,000 right there. Or so.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's 2 days during the
Yeah.
festival. I'm not positive. Maybe that
Yeah.
she could help. I think it's 2 days during the festival, and then maybe Friday and Saturday, or anyway.
Right.
The whole time the festival's open, they have to have that.
Right. So, in line with what you've said, Joe, in order to keep this historical, family-friendly event going, maybe there are ways to partner with Robin Hood that we haven't done. There is no other group in town that gets cash donation. And I think that maybe someday they could become independent, even though I have the same concerns that you have about whether or not they're going to be able to, continue to put the festival on if they don't recruit new people. So do we have a post-event meeting with them where we try to great list that, to improve the event or decrease the amount of time that Public Works has to spend by maybe rearranging things or?
Actually, the police is more involved in the Robin Hood Festival than we are now.
Oh, okay.
We go through the special permit form. We sign off on stuff. We know what's going on. Our costs are probably, we track every cost that goes out of our department, and those costs are pretty similar every year. You can go back several years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so there's not a lot of change on our part. As far as the festival, we don't get involved too much in the actual festival part. So if there's something that goes wrong, we discuss it at the end of the festival, but actually getting in and telling them or working with them that things that they could do better, that's really, I don't think it goes on a lot. It's through the special permits.
Okay.
I mean, Kristen might get in and do some of that stuff, but we don't at the public works side.
Okay.
Councilor Clark, did you have something?
Well, I just wanted to point out, although I appreciate the comments by Councilor Henderson, I think that there's always room for review. We do always have representation on council on the Robin Hood Festival, so I think that there's that strong connection to the city, and I have always appreciated that they welcome us onto that committee. So I would like to make a motion that we retain the $10,000 funding for the Robin Hood Festival.
I'm in a second. May I offer an expanded motion that perhaps we also direct staff, or maybe it doesn't have to be the same motion. We would like to direct staff to maybe enter into some kind of scheduled meeting or something where Joe sits down with them and looks at how the money's being spent and everything. I think that one thing that frustrates this room, I'm sorry, I totally hijacked your motion in the middle of my second. This is still Councilor Clark's motion. But I think that a lot of people are frustrated because just what Council President Henderson said, we don't really see that, but I see it. I see it every time there's a meeting because they go over the budget, every single meeting. And the member of the police force is there, Mark is there, but still, it is kind of like what Craig said, is they take care of their own budget, and we inject money into it so that it has the robustness of being able to do a festival the quality we get. But other than that, there's nothing like that. So can we be more a part of the decision making or whatever, the budgeting or whatever, and at this as a condition of our grant? Kristen, I mean, is there any way to do that? Is there any way to impose that on them or tie that to our funding or any? I have the idea in my head, but I don't have the rubber on the road here.
My sense is it doesn't rise to the level of needing an MOU. Our relations with them are very good. They run a great festival, but I think even like Councilor Grant said, some of their sponsorships compared to others could be higher. They could generate more income, and it's been difficult for us to tell them you should do this because it's not our festival. They've been doing it for 60 years. So, I mean, this is healthy discussion in terms of looking forward, in terms of what does at least this committee feel in terms of continuing to fund this. I put it on the table. It's clear that people, at least from what I'm hearing, is let's keep it at 10,000. I've not heard anybody really saying, it's the time to cut it. So I think the other thing is no one in this room wants to see that festival fall apart at all. I mean, it really is part of this community. And I think it is unique, is what Councilor Clark said. So I've just asked the question by proposing to cut it, whether you want to start that or not. And I'm hearing what I need to hear.
Well, I'm going to second Councilor Clark's motion, and I will pledge to this group that at the next meeting we'll have some real heart-to-heart talks about, the concerns and the direction that would help this budget committee and council in future years. So I second the motion.
Okay. Any further discussion on Councilor Clark's and then reinterpreted by Councilor Grant's motion?
Yes. I deserve that.
Well, I would like to speak in favor of it. I mean, we just had a nice long discussion about cutting 1% out of the budget, frivolous, and we're talking about 1/10 of 1% at this point. And I certainly think that we're seeing more bang for the buck as far as the advertising positive influences of the city of Sherwood out of those two festivals than I am out of whether or not we cut $1,200 out of the uniform budget. So I'm certainly in favor of this issue.
Councilor Butterfield.
Well, I was on the Robin Hood Festival for 3 years. That was 10 years ago. And I think you're right. The same people 10 years ago are still running it. And if they could get some encouragement, get some new blood in there, that might generate newer ideas to help them with their funding. So I'm for it.
All right, then now it's time to vote on the Councilor Clark's motion as stated many times earlier. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Nay. All right.
Thank
motion
you.
Passes. Last item is the final item to discuss is how the committee would like to allocate the general fund ending balance. We had some lively discussion the last time. We asked Julie to prepare a recommendation, and she came back with one. So, Julie, would you like to explain it?
Thank you. So I sent out an email yesterday to all of you, and I provided you a handout of that as well. My recommendation is that we stick with the 5% in contingency, as we talked about at the last budget meeting. We have $90,000 roughly that is reserved for our PEG use, which is for our cable access channel. So that is restricted funds. And then my recommendation is to fully fund the cash for this year for maintenance, and then put an additional amount over into the maintenance reserve that is equivalent to about a quarter of a year's worth of maintenance costs. And Craig and Joe and I met to talk about what we thought was appropriate to put in there as kind of a startup and to give us a beginning balance. And we felt that an extra 150 was the right amount. So the proposal is to put 350 in the maintenance reserves and then leave the remainder in the reserve for future years. That will leave us with a 23% ending fund balance on the general fund side, and then 3% over on our maintenance side. I think that accomplished what everybody was trying to get at the other night. I hope. Councilor Butterfield?
Well, I spent a lot of time reviewing this, and I spent some time with you, and thank you for explaining it 2 or 3 times to me. But I think it's a compromise. It's not exactly what I was looking for, but I think it's a great compromise, and I like it.
Thank you.
And I'll also chime in that I had the same experience going over it and then discussing it many times with Julie. And I also agree that it is a compromise, but it is a manageable one.
I think it's an excellent plan, and I really appreciate it. One question I had on it, though, was that, we've talked about the 20% reserve that by ordinance that is the objective that we have. The maintenance reserves and reserve for PEG, they are currently included in what you would consider reserves as part of that 20% minimum. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I have a little bit of concern that.
Let me step back a second.
Okay.
This is the breakdown of what the ending fund balance will look like in the general fund.
Correct.
So 5% in contingency, 17% in reserve for future years, which is actually 22% together.
Right.
That is what we need to use to meet our 20% goal, are those 2 items together. The rest is dedicated funds that we don't use to meet that 20% goal.
And that was the clarification I wanted to see. Thank you very much.
Are we on agreement, or should we vote on this? All right, then in that case, I will move to. I'm going to wait 1 second. Is there any further discussion while we wait? 1 second. I'm sure
Question answered?
Oh.
He's for it. He's for it.
There you go. I move to transfer $350,000 to the general fund maintenance reserve.
A
I'll
second.
second it.
Second. Any further discussion? All right. We're going to vote on transferring $350,000 to the maintenance reserve. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. And that
One more.
is not the end of what I needed to do.
All right. So yesterday when I met with Councilor Butterfield, he brought up a good question that we had not put an explanation in here for, but I do want to address. And part of this is we're in the middle of negotiations with PGE for our franchise fee, so I don't want to talk about too much detail, but sorry. I'm referring to page 15 in the budget.
Page?
15? And this is regarding the franchise fee chart at the bottom. So Councilor Butterfield noticed that the yellow looks significantly higher for next year. And what this is related to is the extra 1.5% that we are allowed to charge in franchise fees, which would bring PGE's franchise fee to 5%. The last time we talked to council about this, I took away the general consensus that that was not something we wanted to do unless we had a dedicated expense to put that money towards. And internally, we discussed that, and we felt that putting that money towards our annual maintenance would give us a guaranteed amount that we could fund each year for our maintenance fund. So we did put it back in the budget because we felt that met what you had expressed to us the last time we discussed this. I also want to note that that also brings our franchise fee to be equal to what our city utilities pay as well. So, and it puts us in line with the other jurisdictions around us. So I just wanted to call that out, let you know it's in here.
Do you have a dollar amount of what that is?
It's about 200,000.
So, okay.
200,000? In addition?
Yes.
And I'm sure everyone knows that that's
It comes out to be at about $1 a month to the ratepayer.
on your PGE bill.
On your
that
PGE
will
bill.
Transfer to the city.
Yes.
So you're saying that the budget figures as you have prepared them includes that?
Yes.
Thank you.
And it was in this current year's budget, and the council at the time said no, as Julie said. So if they say no, we've got to deal with that gap. So we'll do the same thing we did this year in terms of dealing with it if the council continues to say we're not convinced that we should do that. So we're budgeting the same way we budgeted last year.
Right.
And then it's the assumption that council, after further analysis and discussion, will say yes. If they say no, which is their prerogative, then we
take
got
it
to
out.
deal with it, just like we dealt with it this year.
Thank you.
So the increased franchise fee, what is the projected term for the agreement?
10 years.
10. Okay, thanks.
So before we move on to enterprise funds, I want to make sure if there's any other questions, because we have several staff members that are here for general fund that are going to need to take off. So I want to make sure that we can answer any of your questions you might have left.
Now that you mentioned enterprise funds, this doesn't necessarily involve staff, but was there a conversation, or is it possible that raising the PGE fee could be used to offset the street light fee or one of those that are charged on the city bill? I don't know where the,
No, it was not discussed, and we'd have to look into that. I can't give you an answer. Okay?
I just have a question, more for you, Julie. I apologize, I was trying to read on my phone your response to my question about the professional fees and
I
which
hope
ones.
I got it.
Yeah, I just have a clear, so looking at, oh, I see the annual, oh my gosh. Okay,
Did I answer your question?
you did, I wasn't.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting the recurring fees to be quite so much. Okay, thank you.
new business?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a question on that enterprise fee. So the council, the policymakers said no. So you're placing it back in the budget. So it'll have to go back to council to say yes or no. But if they say no, then you'll have to have it rebudgeted. So where's the analysis that if the policymakers have said no, to bring it back to a yes? Can you explain that?
The policymakers said no at this time. Bring it back with dedicated funds. So that's what we're proposing. We're going to have that discussion. It's part of the PG franchise negotiations. If the council, the policymakers say no, we'll have to make whatever adjustments we need to be able to live within the budget that we have. It's a projection. Some projection on revenues come in higher, some projections come in lower. So this year, when that didn't happen, because our revenue was up, we were able to live within the revenues that we got without having to make significant adjustments. So it's a conversation for a later time. If you say no, then we got to deal with it in terms of financially and living within it. And that's your prerogative. So, but we're budgeting the same way that we budgeted last year, and we're going to bring it back, as the council said, bring it back with a dedicated use of the money, and that's what we are going to do.
Chair.
Yes.
So Craig Sheldon's department put together that maintenance fund projection, right, for the next 10 years. So is this money going into that account? So it's part of the money that we need to set aside to meet the needs of his plan for the next 10 years? Okay, thanks.
Speaking of Craig,
So we're going to move on to our enterprise funds, and we're going to start with street operations. Did everybody get the packet? I thought I got it to everybody on Wednesday night, but I may have missed somebody. I had extras, so I wasn't sure if I got it. I didn't. Kelsey, can you grab an extra packet for Kim?
She forgot.
I was left off.
Sorry. I forgot till
Or maybe
after we'd
it's in
adjourned.
spam. I don't know. No, she handed it to us at the end of the meeting.
I don't remember getting one for sure.
Wow.
It was an agenda packet like this for.
It was
for
the
today.
agenda.
Oh, can I have it anyway? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So the street operations fund is used to maintain and keep our streets up to date, and it also is used for our sidewalks and our streetlights and right-of-way. We have some projects we're going to do this year. We're going to rehabilitate Lincoln Street, and you'll see that item carry over into the next few funds as well, because we're going to take care of the sanitary and storm lines while we have the street opened up. We're going to work on Willamette to Division and on Sunset Boulevard from Heatherwood to Highway 99. We have our annual slurry seal work in here. We're going to do some streetlight projects on Murdoch Road and in Old Town. And we're going to start installing sidewalk ramps throughout the city. We're going to do a certain amount each year to make us compliant with ADA. So those are the big projects we're going to do, and that's why the dollar amount for our budget this year is so much higher. Lincoln Street is a really big project, and in the out years, we aren't looking to do that large of projects. This is one really big project we need to get done. So I'll let Craig talk, or you can ask him questions.
So the street department's responsible for the repair and maintenance for 50 miles of transportation system, which includes paved streets, sidewalk signals, street lights, signs, and markings. This budget also includes crack sealing program, our sidewalk assistance program, striping of city streets, our tree trimming program, and sign maintenance program. And also with the sign maintenance program, we're in our second year of a 4-year program of replacing street name signs, which is a federal mandate. So bigger letters, different prismatic versus an engineer grade sign backing so folks can see them in the, when it's dark. And that was, originally that was all supposed to be done by 2017 or 2016, but they moved it out because some of the cities were having problems funding that program, so.
Anybody have questions for Craig? We're going to move through this section pretty fast. So.
Also, just so you know, we initiated the street maintenance fee a few years ago, and we started doing aggressive slurry seal. We started paving streets. We were fortunate that some of the streets were paved with the waterline project, but our PCI we just had re-rated here the first of the year, and it's at 79. Council's goal was 80, so we're working in that direction, and I think that's a higher 79 versus a low 79 in the computerized system because we actually had to take something out that wasn't completed, and it bounced it to a 79 versus an 80. So originally we were at about a 76, 77, someplace in that mark when we started, and so we have improved by using that money for those programs.
You mentioned installing the sidewalk ramps to be compliant with ADA. How long a period do you have to get in compliance if you're just installing some this year?
Yeah, I haven't seen the actual year that it's supposed to be, but we're supposed to be working on our ADA transition plan for that. And we actually are going to start the program. We felt that we needed to get our initial sidewalks, citywide sidewalks, into compliance before we went out to the property owners for the program. So we accomplished that. Now we're working towards, it's not going to be that many of them, the amount that I think we can probably get about anywhere between 12 and 14 done, depending on the bids, how they come back. But we move in that direction. A lot of the stuff in the older part of town, there's ADA ramps, they're not in compliance, and we hear about it. So we need to start working towards it.
So within the next couple, 3 years, you'll have
I would
covered the
say
territory.
we'd have a lot of them done if we can continue to budget for them,
Good.
yes.
Thank you.
Mayor?
On Lincoln Street, wasn't that in prior years supposed to be done? Just a question. I'm not sure. Or is this the first year we've actually budgeted it?
This is the first year that it's actually been budgeted. We looked at it, I believe, back when the URA, we'd put numbers together for Lincoln Street, but that was for lights, everything up there. This is strictly, just so everybody knows, this is strictly replacing the storm line in Lincoln Street and paving the existing street, coming in with a concrete base and paving. It's not sidewalks.
No sidewalks.
It's not street lights, but it's an improvement. That road is really bad. It's one of our worst roads. And there's just no money through the URA. The URA, I believe, goes up to Division Street, and so we need to tackle it out of our maintenance funds.
I just want to make a comment. Is this on? Okay. No, I'm really impressed with the way our Public Works Department runs the city. I've seen them out there working in some crappy conditions with a big smile on their face. And I'm impressed with the way Craig, schedules his guys and gets the work done in our city. So I'm very thankful for the leadership that we have in the Public Works.
Thank you. Have a good staff. So.
All right, we'll move on to water. Page 3 in your handout. So we've seen over the last couple of years that consumption is going down. People are conserving, which is a good thing. So this chart shows fiscal year 13's consumption by month, for July through April, and then the current fiscal year's consumption. So in the fall, it looks like we were down quite a bit, but otherwise we're running pretty steady with the prior year's consumption. We're proposing no rate increase right now. The water master plan is in the budget for next year. Well, we're working on it now. We'll complete it this summer. And once that's complete, then we will do another rate study and figure out whether or not we need a rate increase or how we need to proceed. That was the consensus of how we needed to proceed last fall when we brought the rate study forward. At that point, was council did not want to do a rate increase this year and wait for that master plan to be complete. So that's what we're going to do. And the master plan is the only thing in the budget for our capital for water this year. But we have a big project in the operations side, and that's our AMI. Am I right, Craig? AMI project to replace our site read meters with automated meters. So we have $600,000 in the budget for that in fiscal year 15, and then the entire project is 1.3 million, and we're going to spread that out over a 3-year period. So we're starting that this year. Staffing staying the same, and we kind of talked about this the other night when we were looking at parks. The staffing at Public Works changes every year. I'm sorry, the total staff does not change every year. Their allocation changes depending on what projects we're going to be focusing on. So it's the same people, we just move them around from water to parks to streets to sanitary, depending on what projects we're going to work on throughout the year. So even though you see FTE fluctuate in those different funds, it's really all the same people just being moved around. So Craig, do you have more to add?
Sure. The water division's primary responsibility is to repair, maintain, and expand the water system while providing a high-quality, dependable water supply to our customers. This budget also includes water line replacement on April Court. So we go in and do a water line replacement. We've had some issues there. April Court's on the schedule for paving here in the next few years, so this is how we kind of do business there. We get in and try to take care of the issues first. Meter testing program, which is a requirement of our Willamette permit. Leak detection program. We have brass inventory that as of January, we tried to use all the brass that we keep in our inventory up because there was a new lead law that come out through AWWA and everybody involved that you can't have any kind of lead in your any small amounts in your fittings. So there's additional money that we have to replace those fittings in this budget. Our clay valve maintenance, which is kind of getting in the details, but we have to do that because that's a regulator between our high and low pressure systems. So we don't blow people's hot water tanks apart, as well as their piping in their houses. Cathodic protection program, sampling program, which is a pretty good cost to us, is in the budget. Our backflow program, also seal coating of Kruger Reservoir driveway entrance into the reservoir. And just so everybody kind of knows, our water purchase is huge in this budget. It's over $1 million. So I don't know if we've ever really talked about that, but where you see a big lump in your water side, 85 to 90% of your water system is fixed cost when you operate a water system. There's not a lot of changes that can happen there. So I just wanted to let you know, it seems like rates have gone up. Our rates are, Portland's raising rates, everybody's raising rates, and we're not planning on raising rates. And our cost with Wilsonville continues to kind of go down. It shows in our, this last year we're not spending as much in the actual purchase of water. It's because we got about a $200,000 check, but $250,000 check back from Wilsonville because we didn't know the first year going in how much water was going to completely cost, going from where they were at, ramping up so Sherwood could take on water. So we're pretty steady, I feel, now where that cost is going to be. Any questions on that?
Okay. Moving on to sanitary.
Did you want to do billing, Joe?
Oh.
You want to do billing? That's the next one in the book. You want to just go on to sanitary.
Thank you.
Also, it's next in the book is the utility billing part of it. which covers all of our enterprise funds. The billing division is responsible for customer accounts, maintenance for approximately 5,700 customers, and manages all water, sanitary, sewer, stormwater, street maintenance fees, and various other utility billings and collections. This budget includes a conservation program, implementation of a utility notification program to our customers, customer service for a variety of divisions in Public Works, administrative backflow program, and actually a low-income assistance program in this year's budget for some folks that have a hard time paying their bills. Any questions on billing? All right, Julie.
Okay. You don't have a handout for that because those costs are spread between water, sanitary, storm, and streets in total. So the sanitary fund.
Never mind, go. I'll ask later.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask about Clean Water Services rate fee.
Yeah. They actually have a proposed rate increase
Increase?
this year for storm and sanitary.
And do we know what it is?
I believe it's 4%,
So
And what was it last year
about the same.
and the year before?
the same.
About the same.
Right, but it's a fee that we collect that we cannot control.
Correct.
It's gone up 12% in 3 years.
And I would expect it's going to continue to go up.
Right.
Okay. So sanitary fund, we do work with Clean Water Services in this department for regional collection and treatment. The city maintains the collection system and Clean Water Services does the treatment. This budget includes projects to do a sanitary line on Columbia Willamette Street, manhole repairs, and to purchase a pickup truck that we've split between both sanitary and the storm funds because we're transferring an older pickup truck out of these funds to the general fund that we discussed the other night. Craig?
The sanitary division manages and operates over 62 miles of pipe ranging from 4-inch to 21-inch pipe in the wastewater collection system in the city limits. The sanitary division maintains and operates a safe and reliable wastewater collection system that protects public health, protects the environment, and meets all or exceeds all regulatory standards. This budget provides training to staff members to meet Clean Water Services requirements as well as the state of Oregon. This budget does contain $25,000 for emergency repairs, so it's not a lot, but it does contain some. It consists, Julie talked about the equipment replacement of the vehicle and maintains the systems to meet Clean Water Service as well as our permit requirements. Julie talked a little bit about, there's a section of main line farther down on Willamette that we need to do some lining. There's a big chunk of money in here. The manhole repairs, just so everybody, the manholes when you drive down the street and you see the bumps around the manholes, especially in Woodhaven. We're spending about $49,000 currently right now out of this budget. We actually bid the project out. Just in Woodhaven alone, there's $300,000 worth of work that needs to be done. So just to give you a heads up, it's going to continue to come, and that's just in Woodhaven area. It's going to continue for quite some time. So where we're budgeting $50,000 a year to take care of that, you're going to see that over and over here for a while.
So. Hey Craig, I've noticed in that older piece of Century Drive that connects to 12 and Sherwood Road, those manholes are all.
Yeah, back when those developments went in, they used a material that is creating the issue now. And we did go in and replace a bunch of those in the Baylor neighborhood several years ago before we sealed it. But there's some real issues in Woodhaven with that now. So, and there's a lot of them, probably over 500 manholes. 400, and maybe not quite 500, but yeah, there's quite a few of them.
Question.
Yeah.
So on that project, the material they used to pave with around the manhole is somehow creating that problem. So do you come in and literally cut out that section, take the manhole out, repave?
Yeah.
And then does that prevent it or?
Yeah, the issue is the material they used in the manholes. It's not the asphalt. It's what's called like a tirecrete. It's a concrete that they seal the manholes up with. They actually set the frame down.
So that's what's
There's
absorbing
There's shrinkage,
yeah.
and there's a variety of things that's gone on over the year, and it's all cracked and stuff around it. It's
Gotcha.
not a safety issue, but it's something we need to deal with before we come in and do street maintenance work too. So And there's some pretty good humps if you drive through Woodhaven area.
And how many of those do you think we have in the city?
You know, we've got a count. I don't know off the top of my head. It's all in our GIS system, and that's in our work management system. So we bid out a certain number. I do know that, and there come back. It's about we had 4 or 5 contractors bid on it, and it's about $300,000 just for the Woodhaven area.
So you're going to kind of do it like we did the sidewalks in phases?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks.
Any more questions on storm? Okay, so I'm going to have Brad come out. And,
Down on storm.
oh, I'm sorry, I skipped storm. Sorry, I turned the page too fast. Okay, so page 6. Again, our stormwater program partners with Clean Water Services, and we've got some projects in this fund as well this year. Like I said, we're going to do our storm line repairs while we have these streets opened up. We're rehabilitating some swales at Riken Park and Miller's Landing. We've got some water quality facilities, Woodhaven, and ditch rehabilitation on Murdoch and in the Old Town area, and then the manhole repairs as well. Okay.
So the Storm Division provides a safe and reliable stormwater system and implements watershed protection, restoration actions that consistently promote surface water quality and stream health. This budget includes monthly street sweeping. There's a couple swale projects that we've had done over the last couple of years that we have to provide maintenance and inspection on, so that cost goes up for about 3 years. We have a change out of some sump inlets, which is catch basins. To meet, we have in an older part of town, we have flow-through catch basins, and these are changing them out for water quality reason to a sump, so it catches the debris off the roadway. Continue to maintain system to meet our permit requirements through CWS, staff training, and again, equipment replacement. And with all the swells, we do a lot of mowing and stuff, and there's actually in this budget a replacement of a 6-foot deck mower. There's an opportunity, or could be an opportunity, this next year to purchase a used sweeper from Clean Water Services that could eventually, if we were to move down a different road than we're doing right now, would set us up. I'm not certain that it's going to be available, but they're telling me it's available, so there's some money in here to, if it comes available, to be able to purchase that used piece of equipment. Any other questions? A couple, like Julie had mentioned, the Lincoln Street, we need to replace the storm line up there. That's a big expense that hits this fund. So we continue to have those expenses as we move forward before our paving projects or other issues. Some of the water quality facilities that went in at the beginning of when Clean Water Services, the new requirements come out to put water quality or swell facilities, we're finding them failing. And we're going to continue to do that. We do a private water quality program as well as a public now, where we went through and rated all our public systems, and that's where a lot of these are falling below standards. So we're going to have to put money into those over the next several years, and I'm sure it's going to be an ongoing deal.
So, go ahead. Yeah, real quick, Craig. So are you insinuating that we may be buying our own street sweeper and we won't have to contract that out?
I think that's something that we could look at the cost, but we also we got to get the sweeper if it comes available first to be able to look at that program. What goes on now is I think you could use that sweeper for a variety of other programs, maybe not our street program, because we contract out our parking lot facility sweeping. We contract some of those things out. It could eventually turn into taking your own. I mean, it would be an offset cost. I mean, a new sweeper is very expensive to get into the business. And we've tried to save for some of those things, and it just is hard. It was hard to do before we have the reserve program. So, yeah, that would be a program that you could do internally versus externally. I think we're getting decent sweeping, decent. But if you had it internally, could you do it better? I think you could. I think there's a little more pride in our community by staff.
I have a general question about, it looks like between storm and streets and sanitary, you're adding a significant number of one-time expenses. What's the effect on ongoing years to adding these one-time expenses? Are we committing to more per year to maintain these things we're putting in, or are these going to fix it and kind of keep our annual expenses flat?
I think you're going to fix these certain items, but to be honest, the city's getting older, no different. We've talked about asset plans that we've talked about. Our utilities are getting older too. So you're going to have the expenses. They might not be 150, 200,000 here for this project. It might be 75. You're going to have the expenses, and I think you're going to continue to have the expenses with the swales because you got to go in and do a bunch of maintenance. It could be just coring of the swells, removing the material, the silt and everything in there. You're going to have some of the costs that we did not have, and I think when we started looking at raising our storm water rate several years ago, these are all the things that went into some of that thinking that we needed to get to a place that we had some reserves that we could do these projects, and here we are.
Okay. It just sounds like what you're telling us is that by going in and making these fixes, it's repairing things that have been eroding over the past, and that'll actually keep our costs down for the next few years. We may have to replace them again in a projected number of years, but the operating expense is not going to be added immediately. In fact, it might even be held flat. Is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, that's our goal, but like I said, you're going to have expenses, and those expenses,
Well,
I can't tell you exactly what they're going to be, but
I
we
understand.
inspect our systems on a regular basis, and that's where our whole maintenance management system comes out of the work that's being done in the field.
Thank you.
Hey, Craig, on the revenue for 13-14, it looks like you're about $500,000 higher in that year than other years, and so what occurred there, and then what's different in the 14 through 18? Why maybe some of that wasn't projected to continue?
Well, I think that's probably shifting some of the money. Julie can talk to you about that. But what we did is when we brought utility billing in, and I've been talking about there's a variety of things that Public Works does with the billing system. We did major audits of our system that had never been done through TBWD or Clean Water Services, and met with property owners, businesses, and what we found is for many years this city was not collecting the proper revenue in sanitary and storm, and some systems went up in EDUs, some systems went down. It wasn't a lot, but I'm very confident now that the city is collecting the proper amount of revenue per Clean Water Services standards. Because how it worked is come through the building department. Building department would send stuff over to TBWD, and this is nothing on TBWD. I mean, we didn't ask them to come do this, but things just, when we were looking at it, to me, it just wasn't making sense to me on some of the stuff. So we did an audit, and that was when Jim was here. And this is some results now. Our revenues have come in a little higher in each one of these because we've made changes of how businesses were getting billed on certain things, multifamily versus residential versus things were set up not correctly. So I think we go back to the whole utility billing, nightmare. There was a lot of things that good that come out of that that we are set up for moving forward, and we'll be doing audits probably every 5 years to make sure the billing system is correct.
And yes, the revenue is lower because we are transferring some of that revenue to our capital fund.
So I have a couple of questions and comments. Lincoln Street, obviously with the opening of Langer Farms Parkway, it gets a lot more travel, it's my understanding, from residents who live there. And one of the reasons that street is so challenging is because the stormwater doesn't drain properly, correctly? Because I think I called one night when there was just a little stream running across Lincoln, and I thought maybe it was a broken water pipe, but Craig explained to me that it was just how the water, flows off of the park and everything up on the hill there, and it just seems to siphon down Lincoln Street. So I think that road would be a lot better. I honestly don't understand why people take that as a thoroughfare when you have to climb that hill, my husband included. So I think that will improve that road a lot. And it's not just in a very poor state because of time, but just because of all the water that runs off of that hill. And then second, I wanted to, we already talked about Clean Water Services and what we have to do and the fees that they collect, which we can't control. And then I was at a Willamette Water Coalition meeting with Councilor Grant and Councilor Clark on Wednesday night, where they were talking about their transmission pipeline project. And after the meeting, we went out and chatted for a little bit. And I wanted to pass along a comment, which basically he said that, what we did previous council, we started in 2005, I guess, making a decision to go to Wilsonville and having our water system in line I mean, we're spending a fraction what other municipalities are doing. And he credited Craig Sheldon for sort of making that happen, his leadership, his patience with Wilsonville, because we had some difficult negotiations, and I think eventually wound up meeting in the middle and finding a compromise that worked for everybody. But it's not often that another, utility or municipality would pass along a comment like that. So I wanted to let Craig know that he did that. It wasn't something I solicited, but it was sort of like, wow, I wish we were in your shoes, meaning Sherwood. And then during the meeting, as everybody remembers, they kept frankly complimenting Sherwood for making the decision we did. And I can tell you that Tualatin and Tigard and Beaverton, Hillsborough, are facing a very difficult and very, very, very up to maybe $1 billion costly project to get the water they need from the source that we are already hooked up to. So there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have one, just looking at the budget, and this is kind of just a follow-up on Councilor Langer's. If I heard you correctly, well, I guess I'll ask my question. I'm looking at all three, the storm, the water, and the street, and I understand the expenditures. I mean, those all make sense, and I agree that they need to be done, but I guess as I look out 3 years and even farther out that we can't see, our spend is outweighing our savings account, right? Like we're spending more than what we're bringing in. And is that because you're moving that money, like you said, to the capital fund? So if I follow that thought process, are we really spending what we bring in, or are we spending more than what we're bringing in? Because according to this, we're spending more than we're bringing in. And so I get the expenses, but long term, I'm just kind of making sure that we're living within our means.
The amount we're transferring for the storm fund is $400,000 of our revenue. So if that was staying in this fund, we would be spending less than we were bringing in.
Okay. And for the water and the street?
For water,
Because they're all three of them, just looking straight, in all of them, we're spending more than what we bring in. So I just want to be reassured that the money that we're setting aside really means that we're not overspending.
in the water fund, it's $400,000 as well that we're transferring to capital. And then in the street fund, what we're doing is we've been saving up for some of these really big projects. And so we're spending that now, and that will start to even back out again. But we will not be spending more than we take in. The goal for me is to get our ending fund balance in these funds at the 20% as well.
Okay.
And that's why I added that line this year to show where we're at. And this gets us there in the different funds.
Okay. But then if we take the street fund, using our same spend pattern into 18-19, we're then going to fall below our 20%. So we need to make sure that
we will start reducing
we're
our
going to start
spend
dipping
pattern.
into our savings. So I guess my thing is we need to start making sure that our spend, aside from those ones that we've saved up for, I get it, we need to start getting our spend in line with what we're
Yes.
receiving so we don't
And
dip
we
into
will-
our savings.
Yes,
Okay.
we will be doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Just a couple of maybe questions to start with. Regarding clean water service, well, the amount of the bill that the city collects for the city and the amount of the bill that the city collects for clean water services. Our portion is not being increased in the coming up budget year, so you're not requesting that at all. Their portion is going up. Do we get any share of their portion for anything we do?
We do. It's a very small portion. For sanitary, I think it's 4%. I was looking at Tom. I believe it's 4%. And for storm, I think it's 25%.
Okay.
So it's a very small percentage
So we
of
get
that fee.
4% of the 4%? Sorry.
So, as Councilor Henderson mentioned, the 3 years it's gone up, whatever amount, Craig confirmed that, 12% or 4% a year. That just concerns me, I guess, because we're able to operate these utilities and not be doing that, we're not doing the same exact work, but we're doing the same kind of thing. They seem to be quite removed from us, how Clean Water Services operates. They're kind of in a little bubble all by themselves. They're managed by Washington County. And I know none of us is going to drive to Hillsborough for a public hearing on a rate increase. So I think every year it goes up without a whole lot of concern. I think also, talking to Craig in the past, we're a very small fish in their pond. So if he has concerns, probably doesn't rise to the top. I wonder if that's a thing that either through the management of the city or through the council level, we can figure out how to have an effect on those rate increases with whatever effort to keep them in line with what the rest of the world increases are.
At least get a larger portion of the increase.
So
Yeah.
the Clean Water Services has several working groups. There's one that Craig sits on that works on the regional projects, operational projects. There's one I sit on that deals with the finance end of it, and then there's one for major capital projects that Bob Galati is involved in. So we do sit at the table, but as you said, we're small fish. But we do get a say and be a part of those discussions. We don't really get to say whether they are going to raise rates or not, but we are there listening to what projects are being done and what is going to be done with those funds. So we're not completely removed from it. I don't want anybody to think that they just get to arbitrarily do what they want. We do have people at the table with them. Any other questions for Craig?
One more unrelated to this, but from the previous meeting Wednesday night, there was discussion from the audience about senior center maintenance concerns or problems or something or other, and I know Kristen and Craig were talking about that after the meeting. I didn't know if you had any update or is
Well,
there?
the senior center is on our facility maintenance plan, and those maintenance items are part of that plan and part of what we're funding each year. So I think Craig's got that handled.
Yeah, and I can talk just a little bit if you want to. So we budget about $37,000 a year on different types of stuff that goes on at the senior center. Sometimes it's hard to hear that we're not doing stuff over there, and because we are. And some of those costs are janitorial services that we provide, fire extinguisher services, HVAC maintenance, HVAC repairs. There's not a lot of money in there for HVAC repairs. But what ends up happening is when we talk about in the general fund, we end up shifting money. There's a little bit of repairs for this building, a little bit of repairs for all our facilities. And an HVAC unit or parts needed there, we end up taking it from another fund to be able to, if it goes over the amount that we actually have set over there. We provide pest management over there. We have a small amount of money for O&M costs over there. We provide landscaping services around the facility, monthly street sweeping. And this year in the budget, the $18,000 is to replace the lights that were originally built with the parking lot there. So back when the facility. So we do have some money set aside every year for maintenance. And then also, I believe in the facilities plan, there's about $500,000 that's been identified over the next 10 years for the senior center. And that's the roof replacement. That's probably coming somewhere around. It was installed in 2001. We did have leaks. We did have a leak over there that we addressed here back in March, and there still needs to be some work done on the inside that we'll get to. So we do work over there, and we do budget for it. And like I said, it's a small amount for the repairs and HVAC. Almost all the HVAC units have been replaced. You don't just go in to do the repairs on an HVAC unit and replace the whole unit. It's usually a percentage. You budget your facility stuff off because you're going to have to buy parts for that. And I believe most of those HVAC units over there were installed anywhere between 2000, 2002, 2003. So they're coming up on their end of their life expectancy, but it's not that there's one unit that's still been there since the day one the facility was built. So just so you know, there is money that's going to be needed to be spent over there. So.
Sorry. Remember my CVI. So you mentioned under sanitary that you budgeted $25,000 for emergency repairs. Do you do that for most of your funds?
Yeah, we have 25,000.
Water.
Here's a prime example. We had 25,000 in water this last year. The sign that went out on Oregon, out on 99 here, we had to go relocate our water line. That wasn't expected until they got out there to work. That bill was about $15,000 of that 25,000 just right there, one cost. So that's the kind of stuff that comes up.
Like the one on Baywood? The line
Yes,
that,
yep. So that was that little deal was probably about $10,000 when it was all said and done. Just $5,000 in paving, and that was a small leak.
Right.
So we do have money set aside for that, and we've had to go in and bore underneath the railroad tracks here once in sanitary, and that ended up costing us about $35,000. So we had to pull $10,000 from somewhere else and not do something. So yes, we do have that in each fund.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Brad, you want to come out? So we're going to talk about telecom. So in the current year, we did some capital investment work because we had some new customers that wanted to come on, but we needed to do some work to be able to accommodate them.
Yeah.
So in the current year, we're increasing our revenue about $100,000 annually by bringing in those new customers on. And the other highlight in this fund is that we have 2 payments left on the loan. So that will be paid off in 2016. And then from that point, we have a more interesting problem. What do we do with this fund? Because you can see the ending fund balance start climbing once that loan's paid off. So I'll let Brad talk about major issues.
Good morning. Sherwood Broadband provides fiber optic-based telecommunication services to the city, school district, surrounding businesses and residents. The utility primarily provides excess capacity to its partner providers who then take that service and resell it as a finished service. Utility serves roughly 80 locations with its fiber, with over 50 of those locations being city or school district locations. For fiscal year 14-15, Sherwood Broadband projects that have budget implications include replacing the free wireless network around town with all new equipment, which will result in greater connectivity and increased reporting capabilities. Additionally, the city is evaluating opening up the public safety wireless network for public access. And if we do that, that will net result in about 40 locations where the free wireless network will be available in some of the parks and some of the other open spaces that we don't currently have access. So we'll evaluate that this next year. Other projects for fiscal year 14-15 include performing a legal review of the utility and building an inventory of common materials which we use in our daily operations. Will help us probably save in our overall operating costs by buying stock of this stuff ahead of time instead of buying it when we need it. And then lastly, the budget sets aside a small amount of capital for potential infrastructure projects and equipment necessary for our daily operations. So with that, any questions?
In terms of your revenue flow, are most of those contracts that you expect to go on for quite a few years?
They are. The contracts will take us through next fiscal year for sure, and then some of them go beyond that as well.
I mean, Julie said looking ahead that the fund will keep growing, but that's obviously dependent on the revenue flowing in. So
most of those contracts have already been renewed before, so bearing some unforeseen event.
Good. Thank you.
Brad, do you have service on the other side of 99
On like the police station side?
over by Edie Ridge and
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's all SCADA?
Yes, school district uses fiber for their building over there, and we have get irrigation leak from our public safety network over there as well.
Any other questions for Brad?
So we're anticipating that in out years, I know we're here tonight or this morning to talk about this year, but we're anticipating a pretty big pile of cash piling up in at least the out years of this forecast. So is there, I know we've talked loosely about it in council, is there kind of a vision for what this fund or what this enterprise would do with that kind of money to grow it? Let's just say we decided, hypothetically, or someone besides me decided that we want to keep this thing going and make it a bigger thing. Are there opportunities out there to use that kind of money to make it a bigger thing? I mean, is there ideas, and is that being discussed, or are we just sitting here looking at big amounts of money just going in the bank?
Great question. As you know, you may know that we did a broadband strategic plan this year, which basically set aside some goals for the community that include broad swath of community members and businesses and healthcare professionals and the school district, and basically answer the question, what does Sherwood need in its broadband infrastructure? A lot of good things came from that. So I think using that information along with revamping the business plan, which, as you might remember, the business plan was written in a time when we weren't making very good decisions. So I think you're primed for reevaluating that now that the finances are different. So yes, I think there's a lot. It's all on the table. There's a lot on the table.
So I had two questions. Mine was actually inverse of Councilor Grant's. Is there discussion about winding down or spinning off the fund? And then the other question would be, how many of the new customers that were received were new businesses to Sherwood?
One for sure, one big one, moved from Portland to Sherwood, and is arguably one of our bigger bandwidth users. Since most of our business is done through third parties, I don't know who moved here. I just see a name and an address, and I'd have to look it up. But one for sure, one definitely moved.
So, one of the original seeds that was planted that brought Sherwood broadband to town was because it would be an economic development tool. So we have a large industrial chunk of land in the Tonkin employment area, and as Brad said, the strategic plan was done, and I think that the council and or the board of the URA needs to decide, what's the future of broadband? Do we want to be in the business of being a wholesale provider? So part of me wonders if this $500,000 that's projected, and that's assuming we maintain the same level of customer base, correct, Brad? Do you have any growth in those numbers at all?
I never project new growth.
Okay.
I never know, but I think maybe last year, I said, or a couple of years ago, I said, a lot of our money was made up from a few handful of customers, but we're getting more customers now, so we can weather a little bit of that storm. We still have some very big ones that pay a lot, but now that there's more to kind of offset potentially, I hope we won't see any big swings if anybody drops off.
Right. So would it be possible, this is an enterprise fund, right? So we are collecting these fees to maintain the asset, right? But the asset's only as good as it's usable, correct? So if we had a new business potentially in the Tonkin employment area that would come to town, could we offer them incentives? Maybe not infrastructure, but like getting up and running, either tech support, equipment. Could we use that fund to offer incentives or programs to help them get up and running with Sherwood broadband, not necessarily getting it to their door? So, it's outside the box, but I don't know what parameters and how enterprise funds can be used. But if it's an economic development tool and we are making more than we're spending, can we use some of that excess funds to assist other businesses in getting up and running as sort of like a grant or I don't know if anybody else has a better word for it. just a business incentive. And in tied with that, they would have projections of hiring so many employees or long-term lease arrangements or something like that. So it's an idea was wondering if staff could look into.
Yeah, we will look into that. We've got several different options that we've already discussed internally that we need to talk to the attorneys of what's legal, what's viable.
Right.
So
because we don't really qualify from a state level for any funding because of our income level. And so if we can create our own incentive plan, I know Wilsonville created your own individual, almost property by property district. And, just a business district is still something I think the council or future councils might consider. But if it's possible, I'd like to see us be able to set some money aside. And if people tap it, great. And if they don't, we either roll it into new equipment or maintenance or training or, whatever's available. So, thank you.
I have, I'm sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
But when you were mentioning legal and questions, I'll also toss out the idea of if it's possible to use excess revenues from the telecom fund to offset the fees for the storm and the like that we charge on the city bills. I don't know if it's possible, but for future consideration, I'd just like to toss that out there.
Yeah, can you take enterprise?
It's on my list of items to
enterprise.
find out
Yeah,
for
exactly.
sure.
Can you take the success of an enterprise fund to help, sort of like it's kind of like your PGE bill, which helps spread out, so your bill is almost the same throughout the year as opposed to having to deal with rate hikes, I guess.
And normally,
I would doubt it, but
normally
it's a good ask.
With an enterprise fund, you're only supposed to bring in what
Dedicated.
you need to operate.
Right.
The telecom fund is a little different than a typical enterprise fund.
And it has different statutes, right?
Yeah, so we're still working on what we can and can't do with the excess money in this fund. So I do want to note, because this will be in the motion, that on page 85, I inadvertently forgot to include the loan payment. It is on your handout included, but it is not on page 85. So when we get to the point of motioning to approve the budget, that's one of the items that will be in that motion, is to include $150,000 for the loan payment.
So that goes under debt service? I have another question. If we think we're going to have excess, I need to go back to the telecommunications. So we'll have a debt service of 150 in 14-15, and then you're projecting a debt service of 181, and then we'll be done?
Yes.
And if we have a higher fund balance, we could, well, never mind, it's just 2 years. I was proposing we pay the loan off early, but
We've thought about that.
but it may not.
That's what I did. That's next year.
Right, exactly. Okay.
Okay. Any more questions for Brad?
Brad, when the Tonquin employment area does get going, just how far away is your main trunk line from that, and where's the cost get put for getting it all the way to there?
We're on Oregon Street now, so we're kind of up the back door of Conklin area. I suspect we're talking with the county about the 124th when that goes through, getting some conduit in there. We already have a relationship with the county for their public transportation systems, so we're sharing facilities with that. So potentially we'll get a conduit in there. Pulling the cable is the easy part, but I would suspect any roads that go in that are city roads, we would have conduit in there too. So pretty easy, I would
I think they're going to give me a limit here eventually. So when those properties come into the city, which we all hope they will, obviously your staff costs are going to go up, right? To service.
I think we're fine is.
Right.
We have one person that kind of manages the network, and he's only half-time right now. I think if we were to increase his time.
Full-time? Okay. All right, thanks.
We're moving on. So next, we will have Julia come up. And we're going to go over capital. This is page 8, 9, and 10 in your handout. So I'm going to quickly go over our capital projects for next year. As I stated earlier, in our water fund, the only project we have is to update our master plan and complete that for next year. In our sanitary fund, we are also going to do a master plan update, and we have the Tonquin Employment Area Sewer Capacity Upgrade Phase 1 project going out there. In storm, we are updating our master plan in that fund as well, and we're going to finish the Columbia Street Regional Storm Water Quality Facility. In streets, we're going to complete the Adams Avenue North construction, and the TSP update is supposed to be wrapped up in July, and at that point we will do an SDC analysis to go along with the updated TSP. In general construction, we are working on the Cedar Creek Trail, the field lights at Edie Ridge and the middle school, and working on the design for Woodhaven Park Phase 2. And we're doing a parks master plan as well. So we have 4 master plans we're doing next year. Get those all updated. They're all almost 10 years old at least, and so it's time to do that. So we're going to take that on next year. The last page has our 5-year summary. As we've stated before, these are estimates. When we do these projects will depend on funding and whether we have the revenue to do them. So the timing may change in these out years, but these are the next projects we have to be working on.
I had a question on this page. The total, if you look at the estimated costs all the way down, is $41,672,000. And if you look at the total over the 5 years, you're at $30 million. Mm-hmm. Is that other $11 million beyond 18-19, or is it already incorporated that some of it's already been spent?
Both.
Both.
Some of it has already been spent. Some of these projects we've already been working on.
Okay, so that cost is included in the estimated cost because it's already been spent.
Yes, and then for future projects, especially things out in 18-19, it will be
some of it goes beyond.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So does anybody have any questions on the capital projects we're going to do? Julia, do you want to add anything?
No, I did a great job. I just want to point out that as we update our master plans, these lists may look very different next year, and this year's spec may look very different next year. So I just wanted to point that out.
I just have one question. Why is it so expensive on the Woodhaven the design? Was it the plan and design? Wasn't it $250,000?
I'm not positive where the specific.
It's 125.
125. That still seems. For a plan on a park. I guess I'm not in the right business, but it just seems that's an awful lot. You could get an awful lot done with that money, but
I think that includes the public involvement, the outreach meetings for what people want their consultant to do the design. So it's basically to give us, here, this is what you have to go build.
And we have no money to build it, though, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But we're hoping in the future.
Is Lincoln Street on this list?
No, it's an operational project.
Oh, maintenance, sorry.
I'd just like to follow up to Mayor Middleton's question because it brings up a good point. We're going to spend $125,000 or propose spending $125,000 to get a design, but we have no way to pay for it. So any idea on how much it could, like just wild guess?
Nope.
600,000, 800, we have no idea.
We don't because we don't know what is going to go in there.
But I'll also add that having the design allows us to then know what to the budget to apply for grants for. So that's the starting point to help you get to construction.
Okay.
Julie, would you say that's typical or normal way you get projects done around here?
Well, I'd just like to add that, we're always talking about having projects that are shovel-ready. So this is how we do that. They're ready to go. When funding does show up, then we can take advantage of it.
And that's a good point. We have received grants and funding in the past because we've had shovel-ready projects ready to go that have given us an advantage.
I think the other advantage to having that plan, that park remastered, is if money becomes available, we could do phase improvements. I think probably, Kim, to redo that park would probably be $1.5 to $2 million would be my guess. I mean, we probably budgeted that when I was on the Parks Board back in 2004. But one of the master plans included a walking path, so people could actually have their kids playing at the park and they would walk a loop. Included a sand volleyball court and a half-court basketball. And so as SDCs came in, or we had a matching grant from the state, or we could maybe do some of those projects because we already have a design. I don't disagree with the mayor that 125 seems like a lot. The one sort of sensitive thing about that park is it's adjacent to Cedar Creek, and so we have some wetland buffers that we have to be concerned about. And I think that getting it done and having it, in place, could make us eligible for things we wouldn't otherwise be eligible for. So,
Do we know about how many acres that area is?
I had to guess.
No.
4?
Craig knows.
I'm hearing Craig was for 6.
6. Okay. How much is it developable? Okay. It's less than 6, yeah.
Those design costs sound pretty close.
And I'll also add that sort of authorizing a certain amount does not mean that we will spend that amount. So we certainly will go through a competitive process and make sure that we're not paying for things that we don't need to pay.
Any other questions on capital?
Maybe not related to capital, but I've heard discussion here and in the council and in the community about dog park. That's nowhere in any of this, is it?
Correct, it is not. And we did not put it in because we really don't know how much. We don't have a design. We have contracted to hire someone to do a design for us, and we are also doing the Bark for Your Park contest, or I guess that's what it is. So everybody on TV, go out and vote. Go to our website. There's a Bark for Your Park, and we could win $100,000 or $25,000 to go towards funding all or part of this dog park. So once we have a design, at that point we can look at how we can fund it, and we would bring it back as a supplemental to council at that point.
Ironically, I was at the Tualatin Dog Park last night, sitting at the picnic table while this gentleman's dog and my dog were playing. And I said, "Where are you from?" He goes, "Sherwood." And I go, "So am I." And I said, "Well, hopefully we'll get a dog park, if we can make it happen pretty soon." And he goes, "Well, I will appreciate it because I won't have to drive all the way over here." So.
Julie, is it fair to say the other 4 park projects that are on there have been on there for a few to several years previously? So the dog park just kind of hit the radar
Yes.
this last year, right?
Correct. The Cedar Creek Trail we've been working on for a couple of years. The Woodhaven improvement design has been on the master plan for quite a long time and has been the Parks Board #1 project.
Improvements.
Yeah, Stella Olson improvements. And then the Parks Master Plan, and then the field lights is relatively new in the last year as well.
This isn't necessarily a capital project, but we just obviously replaced the turf field at Snyder, and even though it's not our property at the high school, do we have an open dialogue with the high school about the life of that turf and whether or not we're going to jointly set money aside to get that, replaced? Because eventually it's going to.
Part of our IGA with them
There you go.
is that they are supposed to be putting money away annually towards that. However, it won't be enough to replace it in full. So I'll let Craig deal with the rest of it.
Yeah, actually, the school district's facilities person they hired recently, and was told that they are putting money aside for that project. He's aware of that project, and after the school year, we're going to sit down and talk about all of our assets and how we're going to deal with that. So I think it's an open conversation and dealing with stuff that's going to come down to no different than what we dealt with on our reserve funds this year and how we're going to do that stuff. I think that's scheduled to be 16 or 17.
So, Julie, does the IGA mention that we'll jointly replace it?
I don't think it talks
Who does the
to
maintenance?
It doesn't really get into who's going to pay for what. Okay. I think it probably was never really thought of.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And we
Is-
have, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We have several assets that kind of fall into this same bucket. The field lights, we're putting them in, it's their property.
Right.
So that's one of my goals for this next year is to work with Craig and the school district to really hammer out a plan is who owns it, who's responsible for replacing it, and who's responsible for maintaining it.
Well, we're all vying for the same amount of tax dollars. I mean,
Exactly.
our source of tax dollars are all the same.
Yes.
Is your staff currently maintaining the high school field?
Yes.
Okay.
We're maintaining all the property, yes.
Okay.
Except the parking,
including the turf field.
including the
Okay.
turf field.
What, in your opinion, condition is the turf field in?
I think it's in pretty good condition. In this year's budget, in the parks budget, there is infill project on the turf field, so that by putting the infill down, you make the turf last longer.
Right.
And as well as GMAX testings in our budget, and those are professional services. We have somebody come in for concussion testing of the turf to make sure that after you put the infill down, that it's rated perfectly.
And maintenance on those fields, we split the cost 50-50 with the school district.
Thank you. Chair, just the Edie Ridge field lighting project, that's not this current fiscal budget, it's next year?
It straddles both.
Okay, so it's some in both?
When's that work actually figured to start?
I think we're supposed to be done by fall, because I believe they wanted it for baseball season, right?
We just had the hearing examiner, public hearing on that, so we're waiting for his decision, which we believe will be positive, and then we can start getting into design and construction. So do you want to comment on timing specifically, Craig?
June. Yeah, I think hearings officer's 2 weeks out from a decision. Sounds like it was going to move forward, hopefully. And once that happens, we've been working with King County Directors Association out of King County to piggyback off a contract with them, which will save us some time. We get a better cost or a better price than maybe doing it on our own. By the time you put all the staff hours into the RFP process and everything that's already been bid, it's a 5-year contract with King County. I'm thinking 2 weeks out. We've already met. We're getting prices put together, so hopefully we can bring something to council either sometime in July with construction in either August or September, so we can get it done before the time switches over is what the plan is.
What's the field drainage like in that field?
Field drainage this year is a lot better. There's still a few issues out there. I think it's just a matter of in the off season we're going to have to to add additional
Some
drainage
French.
out there between the school district and us to make it work on the actual one. On the actual one, baseball field, it still stands in the infield a little bit, but not much.
So we're lighting not only the football field, but the soccer field's behind it? Is that correct?
So it'll be the football field, and then there'll be two lights coming off looking back towards Lady Fern subdivision
Right.
area. The field, baseball field's back there.
Baseball and soccer.
Yeah. So nothing on the far side, I guess that would be of Edie.
Sounds good. All right, thank you, Craig. I will now open the meeting to accept public comment on the 2014-2015 City of Sherwood budget. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms and submit them to the budget officer. The committee chair will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the committee chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and the city of residence for the record, as this hearing is recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Please limit your time to 4 minutes. Thank you. Looks like we have one person. James?
James Kopfer. I'm a citizen here in Sherwood. I just wanted to address really quick police budget. And what I would hope that, and I've talked to a lot of people, I think we need more than one SRO. Up in SeaTac, when I was working up there with the city council, and we implemented a community service officer, which is something Sherwood doesn't have. They did it because it helped offset cost of things like maintaining parks and other things that the city pays for through community service. And then the community service officer also doubled to go around and help relieve SROs in the school district. So garbages, maintaining grounds around parks that we're paying people to do could be done through community service. And then the community service officer could, in turn, monitor that. I'd also like to see a reserve program. And I've had a lot of people comment to me about, as in my position, I get to talk to a lot of people, not only working at the school, but being on one of the commissions in the city. And a lot of people feel we need more police officers, especially in the area of trying to do more for drug enforcement. I think we only have one detective here in Sherwood. So that's my comments.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any further? I'm sick in here. Sorry about it. That was easy enough. I will now close public comment. Now, yeah, let's do a 5-minute break right now.
You're welcome.
All right. Now we're moving on to discussion among the committee. Does anybody have anything further to discuss?
I'd like it maybe if the chief could explain related to the last, the citizen, not the last citizen, the only citizen today, an explanation of current staffing assignments or whatever related. I think one detective, that's truly what there is. That's different than it's been in the past. And I don't know how far back, but you have a 2-minute explanation of how we staff things. And Neil says, and school resource officers.
Yeah, 2 minutes or less, probably. One detective, one school resource officer, and we have one officer assigned to the motorcycle. Everybody else is assigned to patrol. We had a second detective. I think the last time we had somebody assigned was back in 2011, and we pulled that position and put him back on patrol. I'd have to check the date. I could be off. And then we've only had one SRO since I've been here. Just the one position.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
Because I've heard all kinds of numbers. In your opinion, how many people do we need to have?
Well, the issue we're facing is, as I alluded to Wednesday night, is not on the road. Our response times are great. We're able to answer the calls for service. It's the schedule. Any operational schedule, depending on how many people you need to have on, needs to have a certain number of people to maintain that schedule. We don't have the ability, if somebody calls in sick or something happens, to just delay something. We have to have somebody on the road. So that's the problem on as far as the patrol schedule goes. That's why we've moved people to the patrol schedule. And then we talk about we have nobody doing narcotics right now. So unless a patrol officer falls into a case, we don't have anybody working specifically narcotics with the team or on their own or in any way. We only have one SRO, and I think with 7 schools and almost 5,000 kids, we could use another SRO to do other things and have other programs in the schools. We don't have anything in the lower schools unless he has a opportunity to stop in and visit the middle school. So those are the needs I identified this year, was the SRO and the narcotics position. In the past, like last year's budget, we talked about the patrol scheduling and what some of the concerns there were. So I think that's if you're looking for a hard, fast number, I can't give that to you because I think we have to continue to go through the process. But some of the work we've done since, the mayor's suggestion of a study has actually been very beneficial because we've really kind of started looking in different places and getting to know the methodology that's out there to identify this. We've actually, all the reports that are done you can pull off the internet. I've actually been approached by a gentleman who offered his assistance who did this for a couple police departments in Washington County in the past, and he's worked with other police departments since then. He's retired, and so he's familiar with the methodology, so we've sat down with him, and so we're doing that work. There's some suggestion that to get the patrol schedule where it needs to be so that it can handle all the impacts that normally happen to any operational schedule is going to take three bodies. So, and then you start looking at, what are the other services you want to do. So when I talk about involving the community, that's why it's so important, because the community is the ones that need to say, these are the services we want. Is one SRO enough? Or do you want there to be, additional SROs to do things in the grade schools and the middle schools? What does the community feel about narcotics? What do they want us to be doing on that? So that's the dialogue we want to have. But so those are the numbers that we've identified and where the problem areas are. The second half of the methodology is you look at the workload, and everybody that does these studies suggests a percentage of public demand time that's spent on answering public demand calls for service, and then time that's spent on proactive policing. And they suggest that it needs to be in the anywhere from 40 to 45 to 50 to 55% range. In other words, you need to be, your public demand workload should be in that 40% range, and it shouldn't exceed 45%, or it's starting to get too much and you don't have the time to do proactive. And so our workload right now is right in that range. The initial numbers have shown. Again, this is based on the methodology that's out there. So you have to look at those both, because if you say, well, the schedule's not adequate, but your workload is way out of balance one way or another, those two certainly go together. So long answer, it's not so simple as to just give you a number, but those are the things that we're looking at, and and the data that we're looking at. And so that's the early indication that we have at this point. Hopefully that gives you an answer.
So at this point, you're waiting until we do the audit or whatever we call
Well,
it?
there's, as I said again Wednesday, there's two things that we're going to put into place. Number one is to form the police advisory board so that we can sit down with members of the community and start that dialogue about what do you want? What's your expectation? Unfortunately, we don't often hear from the community like we would hope that we would. Case in point today. I mean, we have a meeting on a Saturday morning, so we try to get more community involvement, and we don't have anybody here except for a couple people that have stopped in. So we're going to try to establish that community involvement because the community ultimately is the one that's paying for it. We work for them, and so we want to know what it is they expect from us. And then, we'll make the second piece of that. Then will be the staffing study, and what does maybe formalize the work we've done, or bring in somebody else to look at it, or whatever the decision is made at that point. But those are the two pieces that we're looking at doing.
Okay, thanks.
So,
is it fair to say we expect the study data to come back indicating that we need one or more officers in some way, shape, or form?
Based on the data that's been looked at by the gentleman at this point, that's from my perspective, that is fair to say.
And what's the reasoning if we say theoretically agreed in the room collectively that was hypothetically the right way to go, that we know we need at least one, what's the rationale behind not just going ahead and picking one and getting that checked off the list and getting something rolling, and then getting the study to justify future and additional ones several months down the road? I say that because I remember sitting in this room last year and we talked about that we needed an officer and that we didn't have the money, and so here we are in year two, and it seems like we still need one, and feels like there's community support for it. So
I'm not sure I can provide the rationale. It comes down to the budgeting process and the challenge of funding.
I can take a stab at that.
Okay.
What we're really looking for is, what I'm looking for from this study, I'll speak from the finance director position. I'm looking for this study to tell us what our base need is to just do basic police work. How many people do we need and in what mix? And then what do we need if we want to add these additional programs? We want DARE or Neighborhood Watch or CERT or whatever. What do we need to add that? And then we can take that and say, okay, this is what it's going to cost to accomplish this. Community, how are we going to pay for this? Because we know officers are expensive. They're not cheap employees, okay? And we have to have a long-term sustainable funding source. I don't want to hire people and then lay them off in a year because we can't afford to keep them. That's not fair to them or our other officers. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a plan that we can use to secure a sustainable funding source.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that every year, I believe it's every 2 years, that they go back in the county and do the enhanced patrol districts, which is it's kind of over and above what the department would do. We should start right now, I think, looking at, we're going to have to do a levy. There's just probably no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Why don't we get in the process, and we would be that far ahead of the game of saying, and have the chief respond with, this is our needs. I mean, we could wait till after the study. Probably be better to wait, but our next step should be right into developing a levy, not talking about, because we just can't add an officer this year. Look at our budget. I mean, it's not sustainable in the long term. I mean, we could probably pay for them for 1 year, but where's it going to come from in other funds? We've shown how tight we are on here. But if we have a plan that right after the study, the chief sits down and gives us this is what we need, is this what the public wants, and we follow through with it. So we're not wasting time. By next year, you would have all the answers, and we could come in and say, we're going on the, what ballot would we have to go on, the one we don't have to pay for?
November.
Well, there is a mid one usually, too. Yeah. May would be the better one, yeah. But I mean, that's a small cost to pay if this is what we need. But we'd be ready to hit the ground running, and then we wouldn't have to wait. But let the public decide what they want. It's the public funds. It's not our money here. I mean, I think all of us would vote in the affirmative to keep the department up and running, but the public's the one that, in the bottom line, needs to decide what they want.
Well, actually, I'll defer to you first, and then
okay.
I'll go.
You told me you were going to go first because you're the chair.
Exactly.
I'm okay with that. So I just have a couple of questions. So I think Andy had asked this question on Wednesday's meeting, and perhaps it's my not grasping. He asked the question with our new influx of population, temporary population with the Walmart going in and all of those other retail stores coming in, do you have the support that you need? And your answer might have been a little vague, so I'm going to be like you here and kind of put you on the spot. So I'm asking, right now, I'm assuming from what I'm hearing from you is the staffing that we have is borderline adequate for the population as it is right now. That's what I'm hearing, that we possibly, well, not even that, because you wanted a resource officer and a narcotics officer in order to meet the needs of the community. And I have to say, I had a very uncomfortable conversation with my middle school child, which, Lord help me, I know will not be the last one, regarding drug use at the middle school. And it was very uncomfortable for me in terms of I can only do so much as a parent. So I agree that it is for the public to decide, but I'm part of the public, and I have a concern about the narcotic use that I'm hearing from not just my child, but from other child that is going on at the middle school. And we've all been there. We understand the peer pressure and things like that, but I'm a little concerned about that and the pressure that it puts on. And then also, in response to Andy, I just don't feel like there is enough resources to support potential issues, potential thefts, call-outs, anything like that with the new establishment that's going on. And so I would just like to understand from you, what are we doing to prepare for that? I agree. I'm in favor of doing what we need to do to keep the community safe. I have concerns about waiting to push the button and do anything until we get the review done, because like any position, I'm assuming there's a ramp-up time, there's a training time. We didn't get an officer last year. We're talking about not getting one this year. I know in my profession, the ramp-up time is 18 months. Okay, so let's just say it's a year to be conservative. It's a year ramp-up time. We're talking 3 years down the road before we get any true support. I don't know if I'm personally okay with that. I mean, I just like to put it out there.
A lot of information.
Can I interrupt you so that maybe you can answer both our questions at the same time?
Sure.
So, in line with Kim's comment, the narcotics officer just doesn't respond to narcotic incidences or uses or reports. They do prevention too, right?
Not necessarily. It depends on how the position is set up.
Okay, how would you have that person be also working on prevention with, partnering with?
I would, unless you can help me understand what you mean by prevention, I'd say no. So if we have if tomorrow some way we have a narcotics position, my plan is to assign them to the the county interagency narcotics team. Okay, again, economy of scale. You send one person out and say do the best you can, or do you assign that person to a team where they now suddenly have 12 other folks or however many that it can assist them? The understanding would be that they would handle every bit of information, every case, every report, everything, every tip that comes from Sherwood would go to our person on that team. And they would then have all the resources from that team. They would have all the intelligence. And so a tip on John Smith comes in, and now all of a sudden they realize, oh, wait a minute, the person that's working, the Hillsborough area has the same tip. So, I mean, it's just huge benefits. And we have the resources of the entire team at our disposal should we have an incident in Sherwood. Like several years ago when we had a second detective, they were assigned 50% of the time. I'm going to come back to your questions, but this is to the interagency team. We had a local dealer. It was small case in terms of the team's general types of cases they carried, but we told them this is a big deal. This is a livability. The entire West Side narcotics team came into Sherwood, served a search warrant at a house over by Murdoch Park, and made a huge impact. I mean, it was like a wildfire spread through the narcotics community, through the high school. Everybody knew the main heroin dealer had just gotten knocked off. So we have that at our disposal. So that person is just going to be going great guns. And so in terms of prevention, if you're talking about will they be giving narcotics talks and public education talks, yeah, absolutely. But in terms of classic prevention types of activities, they're not going to be teaching DARE or any program like that. They're not going to be doing neighborhood watch types of things unless it's specific to narcotics. So that hopefully answers that question. And let me get to the other. So in terms of retail space, we've absolutely planned for this project and any others that come. And again, the issue that I'm addressing is not that, hey folks, we can't keep up with calls. That's not our issue. Our issue is we can't keep two people on the schedule without paying overtime. We're going to have 2 people on 24/7. And our schedule now is starting out with 2 people. So that means somebody wants to take a day off, they can't. Somebody has a guaranteed vacation, we're paying overtime. Somebody's sick, we're paying overtime. Somebody goes on military leave for a year, somebody gets hurt. These are all the things that every organization has to factor in to their staffing availability, and that's where the problem lies.
So if I can just interject then, for my layman's terms, you're telling me that there's no work-life balance. That's what I come to.
Well, that is the issue, yeah. And so, because we have people that have to work these overtime shifts. So certainly that's what you have overtime for, but it can get to a point where you're having to over-rely on that. My preference is overtime covers shift on occasion, but what overtime is really spent for is community events, things that are going to directly impact the community court. We have no control over court overtime. We spend a lot of money on that. But so that's the retail thing. There's nothing in my data that I went out and gathered when it was announced that this project was coming. Same with the Coles project. How we plan is we start to look at data. We start to look at what do we believe the impact's going to be. So just like we do with Coles, and Coles told us this is what we anticipate. We saw pretty close to what they said, and now it's leveled off. There's nothing in the data that I looked at that suggests we're not going to be able to handle what's going to go on there. Is it going to impact our annual public demand calls? I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's also going to provide a great opportunity for officer-initiated activity. Anywhere there's people, you have things where police can get busy. But in and of itself, it's not going to, I don't think it's going to overload us. And again, that's not the concern. At some point now, as we look 5-10 years down the road, how does the community change? Then that's absolutely something that plays into the factor. Because at some point, again, that ratio, we want to maintain that 40 to 50 percent time ratio between public demand and proactive policing. If we start to get too high on public demand, that means we're not doing proactive policing, we're only reactive, and research indicates that's a bad thing. That's what really starts to impact the crime rate over a course of time, not in 1 year, but over a course of time. That's a bad thing. So you want to maintain that healthy ratio. So I think that's probably a more verbose answer to that whole retail thing. Is it something that we need to be paying attention to? Absolutely, but it's not something that's going to suddenly, oh my gosh, we can't keep up with it. Because again, that's not the issue for us.
Are we paying enough overtime to maybe pay for an officer?
I would need to sit down before I threw out a conclusion on that and talk to Julie, because our budgeted overtime amount is not equal at this point to what an officer, what the cost of an officer would be. So you can certainly get to that point, but the other issue is a schedule. As I said, not to overly beat this, but a schedule needs to support itself without constantly going to people and saying, you got to work more, you got to work more, you got to work more. As a leader, I have to pay attention to that to make sure folks aren't getting burnt out. So that's we need to have a schedule that supports the normal impacts that any schedule will have or face.
Chief, can I ask you one question and then a comment for the committee? Your thoughts on a reserve program was brought up earlier, the effectiveness and the leverage we could get from that. And then to the committee, we've talked about this for 2 days. I think some sort of motion out of this would be helpful. My suggestion before the chief goes would be to, if we are going to move for half an FTE, because assuming that the study doesn't get done until mid-year or so, if somebody were to move, I'd say try to plan for a near immediate hire rather than putting this off another year. So, Chief.
So the short answer to that is, yeah, we're trying to get a reserve program going. It would be beneficial. It would take a long time unless circumstances were perfect and you got somebody that was a long-time reserve from somewhere else and came here. It would be a while before you'd put a reserve out by themselves, and that's really then becomes a philosophical question. Excuse me. A lot of agencies will never go there because they just don't want to put them in that position. Mm-hmm. Other agencies will allow a reserve to get to what they call solo status. A reserve officer is a unique animal because you have somebody that's a complete volunteer. Yeah, you can't cut any corners on their training, their experience, their comfort, their ability to perform the job, so that they're not going to get hurt. Somebody else is going to get hurt. What I don't want to do is start bringing on a bunch of reserves and not do it right. So we've had some opportunities with some folks, a gentleman in particular that is not only an experienced reserve, he's a retired full-time police officer. He has experience managing reserve programs. We're trying to get him on board, and he can help do that. So we're actually trying to get there. That's something that we've talked about for a couple of years. But my hesitation is I want to make sure we do it right, because that's yet another risk and liability that we enter into, and we got to do it right. We all know, tragically, that reserves get in the absolute same kinds of dangerous positions as full-time officers do with the Oregon City thing. So we got to make sure we have the right people and they're trained, and the program is managed appropriately.
I was just going to follow up, and it's previously mentioned, but all my years of experience, you find so many times that overtime, there's two issues. One is that it does almost pay for another person if it gets to be that. The other thing is that people get so used to it that when you cut down on the overtime, they feel that they're being penalized. Just as an income roll, people just get so used to expecting that overtime. So I think there's two reasons there that you really want to manage overtime, and it's certainly the costs really get high when you're paying time and a half all the time.
I guess I would just echo the mayor's comment that whatever we're going to do when this study is over, when we find out from the citizens what they want to do, it's not in the city's capability at the moment to fund any more people. So it's going to have to go to the voters. And Obviously, we haven't heard anyone say we don't want any more, but I know there are people out there that if you had, more than one is too many. So they vote two, although they may not be vocal about it. So you got a sales job to do, or we have a sales job to do, and people are going to vote with their pocketbook, and so I see this as an interesting dilemma for us, and I don't know the outcome. So, but the only way it's going to work, if you're adding very much, is going to the voters to do something on a 5-year levy type of thing, and there's a lot of work there.
So the question comes back, is there a motion to be had? I'd be happy to offer one up to vote, but it seems like everybody's silent.
If we wanted to perhaps add back in an item from a requested items that were not in the budget, which is on page 8 of 10, the beginning of our packet. How is that any different than what the mayor suggested, which is a 1% cut? From a standpoint, but the department, which would go back, they would remove some money from the account to try to. If I had my choice, I'd add the narcotics officer. Just because I went to a drug summit in March and down in Salem at the training center, and Oregon is the 5th highest user of illicit drugs in the nation. So 45 states use less drugs than Oregon does. We have the whole issue with medical marijuana. We have a temporary ban in place, but most people who are in Salem are facing these issues think that legalization will happen in 2015. And not having anybody working on that issue in our community, just like Kim said, she's only talking about one middle school. And then there's a reason why our SRO only spends time at the high school. If we could fund a position, that would be the position, I would want to fund. Julie told me that she was hoping that we could get to we're spending $20,000 to $25,000 on the police study. Getting that, if it's approved, she could start the motion to get the RFP going, working with the chief, and maybe have it, ready to go to bid by the first of the fiscal year. But I would like to know if anybody else on the budget committee thinks that that there's a need greater than public safety. This last couple of days I've been talking to people, and the people I spoke to, some of them have that perception, just like Steve mentioned, which is that we have enough. But when we talk about the trends and what's coming up in potentially the narcotic realm of our state, similar to Colorado and Washington, everybody's number one concern is public safety. Ironically, I was at Comcast yesterday helping my mother get some new equipment, and I was asking about service for our family or changing services, and they were trying to sell me a security camera. And it was part of the upgrade, and it's in addition to the $100 fee, and you could put it inside or outside. And I'm like, why do I need that? And I joked with her. I said, I live in Sherwood, and I have a dog. I don't need a security camera. Why are you trying to selling me something I don't want? And, she was like, there's no contract. And as I was driving home, I'm thinking, I feel that way because of the philosophy of our police department. That's my opinion. And I feel that way because of the service that we receive. But this is an ongoing issue not only for Sherwood, but for the entire nation. And so the sooner we can do that, the better, I think. And I agree with Steve that you have to open a dialogue with the community. You have to help them understand what our needs are. But I'm also worried about what Kim said, which is the quality of life of officers. How long do they continue to work shifts and overshifts. I have a friend who's a Multnomah County sheriff, and he's worked overtime for 20 years. And it's just a function of life now. And exactly what Lynette says, he banks on his overtime for his income. And if that were to go away, his life would dramatically change. But his life would also dramatically be more livable if he wasn't working a double shift twice a week, which is what he does. He goes in at 11 o'clock at night, and he comes home at 3 in the morning, goes home and sleeps till 10, and gets back up at work and goes in again at 11 o'clock. So if we want to make a motion as the chair suggested, I guess what are our options?
Linda, could I just quick follow you up?
Oh.
Sure.
I just had one thing too. I think public safety obviously is important, but I also think all the other departments are very important. Parks keep kids from getting in trouble. Public Works maintains our facilities, so you don't have brush hanging around, so we don't have homeless here. I think they're all intertwined. And to say one is more important than the other. Public safety is important. We have a very low crime rate. It's because of our demographics. It's not so much made up of. I think that you have a town like Cornelius, which is a lot smaller than us, has 10 times the crime rate. So I think a lot of it's involving the citizens, too, with their community service and what they care about the community. So all of them are important. If you wanted to do the narcotics one, we'd have to see financially where we're going to have to take, because we're going to have to chop other ones. And I certainly don't want to start chopping other departments. We have Music on the Green. We have all these kids programs in the libraries. They help from us I have very limited experience in this, obviously. But it helps in the long term, because if you can get with the kids now, and we have a lot more active parents here than most communities, it's very, very important that we keep all our programs, and we can't just focus on one. I think it's important. And we had the narcotics officer for years here. And it was Corey Gentz, as a matter of fact, and he did a good job. So you just have to set your priorities, too. And that's me. I don't want to take from any other department, because I think they're all doing a great job.
Just want to follow up on the narcotics. Some of the citizens may not be aware, but we've got a youth substance abuse task force that we've been working for over 18 months with several agencies, several meetings with maybe 20 to 40 people in the room, and it's identified a pretty healthy need for youth narcotic issues being addressed around here. So I know there's a need and a demand for it. I know that particular group and program even needs its own piece of funding. They're looking for $20,000 to do some of that work, but there's a lot of youth narcotic need around here that needs addressed. So that's all I've got to say on that.
Well, and I wholeheartedly agree, because I also went to a program on drug use and youth drug use specifically. And although I would love to see a narcotics officer, I have to agree with Steve and the mayor that where's it going to come from? We need to have to budget it. I would love to see a full-time education program. The narcotics officer would be an intervention program. I think, as Kim was talking about, that we really need to have an education program. But again, where's the funding going to come from? So I think that, having the study for the police to tell us this is what we need would be a great selling point to go to a levy, to go to the citizens, to say, this is what we need. Is this what you want funded? Because I think that there is definitely support around the community. What I've heard, we need that intervention. We need that education so that we don't get to intervention. So I feel that you need to take the steps to get you there.
Councilor Langergan.
Well, we talked about this last year, and I feel like this is one of the topics that just keeps getting kicked down the road, waiting for another study to make a decision that's just going to push it out another 6 to 12, 18 months. By the time we actually get a levy and get funding approved and get an officer, maybe we're talking about 30 months. And I just think somewhere in this budget, the mayor already asked for 1% cut, and that's almost 1/3 of one officer right there. Why don't we just dedicate that towards the officer and get it done? Find the other 2/3 somewhere and do something, and go ahead and do your study, and that'll get a long-term plan. But in the short term, clearly there's a need and a demand for it, and I think it's just a disservice that we just do nothing and sit on our hands. So enough kicking the can down the road for me.
Can I just say something real quick just to follow up? So I think unfortunately my neighborhood was, I don't know if this is the house that the chief was talking about, but a house 4 doors down from my house. And I don't live in a bad neighborhood, not that I think there's a bad neighborhood in Sherwood. But I come home from work one day and my mother informs me that a barrage of police officers went onto this house, and it was a house that was selling heroin. Now, as a mother and a parent and as a citizen, public safety for me is above all anything else. Knowing that my children played at that house with those 2 kids, not blaming the kids at all, scares the living crap out of me. It was a heroin house. There were people going in and out. I'm in a family community, and it scares the crap out of me. I agree we need education, but I think we also need a narcotics officer. I lived in a community up in Washington that was, what, Lynette, 4 times the size of what we are in Sherwood? I didn't have any house in my neighborhood. I lived there for 15 years. I didn't have a house in my community that was selling drugs and my kids were playing with their friends. It really resonates with me and scares me. It's not just the school, but it's in my neighborhood. Thankfully, it's gone, but would you guys want your kids playing out somewhere where 4 doors down, they're selling heroin? Holy, scares the crap out of me. So I just want to throw that out there because it's scary.
So to kind of move this conversation along, I'll toss out a motion and we'll see how it lands and go from there. So I will move that we put in a halftime. The narcotics and SRO are about the same, so we'll use that as your average base, half FTE in the budget. And if the study comes back saying that we need an officer, we have the money allotted, and the chief can, at his discretion, go higher. If the study comes back saying we are fine and staffed, he does not have to hire. I will leave it to the chief and the city to make that decision. So that's a long-winded way of saying that's the motion. I just want to move the conversation through.
Before the motion goes through, I just have one question. How would we budget that?
I would assume we just reduce the forward ending budget, but if you'd like, we could reinstate the 1% reduction to all other departments. But I would assume just reducing the money carried forward for 4 years.
Okay. I'd like Julie to answer that one.
Very well.
Okay. So we have 2 options. We find cuts to make that offset it, or we take it out of ending fund balance. Not my recommendation to take it out of ending fund balance.
Start half year.
That said, if we were to bring on a full-time officer, our overtime chief, come on up so I can discuss this with you.
The motion is for a halftime,
Yes.
0.5 FTE.
Sorry, full-time half year. I would assume the study is not done on the first day of the fiscal year, so leave time for that to come and go, and then fund for the remainder of the year. If you fund the full year's salary, people will be funded.
So my assumption is if we were to bring on a person, whether for half the year or for a whole year, that overtime should go down some. It's not going to go away because, like Jeff said, there's court that we have to pay overtime for and just basic coverage things. So we will never do away with overtime.
Oh, I know that. You have court and all that.
So we would see some savings there. Not enough to pay for the full position. So, like I said, we have 2 options. Cut something else or take it out of ending fund balance if that's what.
So Tim, can I have you amend your motion and I would support it, and that would be if we don't use ending fund balance
Okay.
and we take it from other departments?
Yeah, I would assume that the staff has come up with some, and a reduction in police overtime may account for some. So I would assume that's marginal. Jane?
Can, Julie, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify something. The conversation that I'm hearing is talking about a narcotics position. The overtime concern I expressed had to do with patrol staffing. Two separate things. So
Are we
I just,
specifying which one it is?
No, I am leaving it to the chief's discretion.
I thought it was narcotics officer.
I just saw two numbers here, narcotics and SRO. The number was about the same to do the math. I just assumed that that was the approximate cost of a police officer.
Do we
But-
have to specify which it's going to be right here, just to budget an amount? I like the idea
No,
of getting the money budgeted and then deciding exactly, based on future conversations with the chief, the best way to use that resource.
Yeah.
Yes, this committee does
That
not
was the attempt.
budget people. This committee
Right.
budgets money. So you get to say add X amount of money to the police services budget, and then it's up to Jeff and Joe to determine how to spend that in the most effective manner.
I'm going to second Tim.
Can we clarify?
We-
what-
yeah.
I was going to say, Tim, could you please clarify your, restate your amended, because I just need to know what I'm voting on here.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm moving to add to the, or add a police officer for, I said 6 months, a full-time police officer to be hired to the budget, and I would like the source of funds for that to not come from forward year, but to be trimmed from other areas.
From ending your balance.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, whatever you call it, funds for future years. Instead come from,
We have to identify those now.
You have to
You have to
identify.
identify them now.
So what would 50,000 out of our ending fund balance make our contingency?
oh, well, here, let's do it this way then. It's the SRO and the narcotics officer, 105 and 104, or 103, so the average is 104. We've got a identified $34,000 of savings, so we'll take those savings from the places allotted by staff and take $20,000 from forward year funds for forward years. Is that fair?
So you're talking about identifying it. Could you go back to the departments and say, bring us back 5% now, and that would equal?
Well, it wouldn't be.
It would be somewhere in that nature. Have each department identify where they're going to cut. So
Can I? So the chief,
It's a 1%.
we're talking. 50,000. Here's an option. What we can do is we can leave the budget alone, and do the study, and then come back and say, and with the supplemental, to add 50,000 or 55,000 to the budget partway through the year. Once the study's complete and we know that we need this, we don't have to wait to do a levy or wait to do a fee. We could come back at that point and do a supplemental to add it at the half-year mark. Is that what?
yes, thank you. And let me just add to that. We have less control over the RFP and the study and all that. We have far more control over the police advisory board. So what I would offer is that probably within a month or two, I got a frog. I'm really not choking up. I just have a frog. I would think a month or two, we could potentially have a community group, our PAB together, that could then provide additional input. I mean, they could go out and talk and all that stuff. We could further look at this. And if you're talking about staffing for 6 months, I think we'd still be in the same position with more input from the community rather than trying to make these adjustments on an already tight balanced budget now. We could then come back with a supplemental. So I just throw that out as food for thought, because maybe we get the RFP and the study done by then, but I don't know. I think there's, like I said, less control over that. I know we can put applications out and get the advisory board started probably a whole lot sooner, and then that gives everybody, you all and us, that much more community input about, yeah, we need to do this. Here's what it should be for. That's just my thought
And
to add to that.
At that point, if we came forward with a supplemental, that would allow us the time to find where to cut to offset the costs as well.
Then, based on the chief's comments, I will withdraw my motion. Is there any other?
How long do you think it's going to take to get the study done? 3 months?
I don't know. I think.
And I guess I'd like to read the RFP before it goes out. We're spending $25,000 to find out if we're efficient, or we're spending $25,000 to find out what our community needs and wants and where we should be going for the future. Because if we're inefficient and we don't know that, then I think we have bigger problems. Philosophically, I think that those problems are always going to exist, whether or not certain people in the room agree with how the police department is run. But I guess if we're going to spend 5 figures times 5, I want to know what is the preface for the study? Is it just efficiency? Is it just manpower? Or does it look at the whole scope of what the police department does in relationship to patrol needs, community service needs, narcotic needs, investigation needs, interagency needs? Because if it's $25,000 just for efficiency, I don't necessarily think that that's a great use of time or money. Not to mention the disruption that the department will go through during the time that the study is done. So maybe you staff in the near future can help us explain how the RFP is structured and sort of how long. It's kind of like the Parks Master Plan. That master plan literally was a snapshot for that day and time when it was done, and essentially it's at a date. It's just like a balance sheet. It's only a snapshot for that day. How long will that data be good, or how long will we be able to rely on that data if we need to go out someday for a levy or something?
Tom's been working on that scope of work, so I'm going to defer to him to talk a little bit about some of your questions. So,
sure. Well, obviously, scope of work will be something that we bring to council before we actually go out with a request for proposal. But I think our intent is really to do both, and that's one of the reasons we're talking so much about forming the board as a part of this, is because we'll get a very robust, statistical and data analysis of where we're at in the police department, as well as our intent is to project that out for a number of years. But a very important component of that is well, what are our community values? How much? What do we want to do with those? Not the calls for service, but the other calls that the self-initiated calls, and so I think both. I think it's very important that study looks at both, and that's probably where the certainly a study can be done in a fairly short period of time, but there needs to be a robust conversation about, well, what does this study mean? And more importantly, what does it mean to Sherwood? Because Sherwood's a different community than other communities that this study will be evaluated against. So I think our intent, at least from moving this forward, is both, and we're hoping to accomplish that within a 6-month time frame, but the big variable there will be, how quickly can we have those community conversations and wrap those up, and then say, okay, well, based on the community conversations and what we want our police force to be doing and how proactive we want to be doing, that will determine, how long it takes at the end of the day.
Do we have any other agencies in Oregon that have done this, whose report we can read, that's not from a different state?
Well, there certainly have been some that have been done that you could look at examples. I know there was one done in Gresham, but it was fairly different than what I think we're intending to do here, because we really, the community input was probably, they didn't do a whole lot of that, and I think that's really important for what we're looking at here.
And I think that's what this committee needs to be prepared for, is if we do the study and people say we want more and we want more of this, then we're going to have to find a way to deliver, because just like in private industry or public industry, you do an attitude survey and you present the results and you do nothing to change the perception, then you've just lost the trust of either your community members or your employees.
And to piggyback on that, I think what the mayor said earlier, my gut's telling me we're going to get to a decision point of this is what we want, This is what it's going to cost. We don't have the resources currently to do it. We're going to have to go to the voters. I think that's the end point. And that's a big ask. I mean, people are paying now significant
Yeah, we have
dollars.
no higher tax rate in any other community than in Oregon.
So, and I hear the frustration that we're not doing things now. But one of the reasons I said no right now is I can't support it without damaging other departments.
Yep.
I mean, we could fund a narcotics officer and not do the planners. But then I've got a problem where the work that the planning department, which is very important for the livability of the future of this community, isn't going to get done. So, you know, you're grappling with the same issues that we grappled with when we put this budget together. And it has to be sustainable. And that takes time to make those decisions in a thoughtful way with the community. And that's really the reason why you didn't see me saying yes to any of the additional officers in the police department. It's not that I don't believe we have a need or I'm concerned. I think it's a bigger question in terms of what does this community want in the foreseeable future in terms of law enforcement. What does that look like? And that's different in this community than Gresham or Beaverton or other communities. And we haven't engaged the public to the proper level, in my opinion. So
it is 1 minute till noon, and actually my iPhone says noon. We'd scheduled this meeting to go till noon. We still have to vote and approve the Sherwood budget and the URA budget. Do we want to stay and get it all done? Do we want to hold over for a third meeting to review the URA? Thoughts around the table?
It seems to me that we have consensus, at least moving forward on the police staffing issue. I think we've kind of all heard a direction, and I suggest that we stick it out because I think we're at the final, at the end, at least for the city budget. Whether or not you want to open up the URA budget, that's going to take too long. I'd like to stay and not have another meeting for a little bit, maybe a break, or I don't know if people want it. No, I'm fine. Just stick it out.
I concur with that.
If we're going to stay, let's stay.
All right.
I don't need a break.
Lightning round then.
You don't need a break.
You already won't.
All right. So I hesitate to ask, but is there any further discussion? All right. I move to approve the proposed 2014-15 as amended by City of Sherwood budget as amended by previous motions with the following adjustments. Correct the scrivener's errors and formatting as necessary. Increase debt service in the telecom fund $150,000. And I also move that the City of Sherwood Budget Committee approve taxes for the 2014-15 fiscal year of $3.29.75 per $1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All right. I will now call for the vote. All those in favor, are we hand raising? Or saying aye?
We're on.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Nay. Believe that passes. We are now adjourned for the City of Sherwood. The budget meeting for this is adjourned to the URA Budget Committee meeting. What? Oh, budget. The City of Sherwood Budget Committee is adjourned